feels just like you. Go outside and be kind to a stranger. Watch what happens every time you do. Yeah. When you're down and feeling like you're lonely, someone else out there feels just like you. Go outside and be kind to a stranger. Watch what happens every time you do. Yeah. When you're down and feeling like you're lonely, someone else out there feels just like you. Go outside and be kind to a stranger. Watch what happens every time you do. Yeah. When you're down and feeling like you're lonely, someone else out there feels just like you. Go outside and be kind to a stranger. Watch what happens every time you do. Yeah.
Multilateral institutions that we've built to address the global crises that that we face are quite simply inadequately designed to meet the moment. Right now, governments are forced to put forth higher ambitions with fewer resources and less time. So the question becomes, how can we do more with less? The future demands that we find a way to acknowledge and address that desertification is accelerating. Biodiversity loss is intensifying and climate impacts are multiplying. But here in Panama, a different story is emerging. And at the heart of that, the Panamanian government has spearheaded the Nature Pledge. The Nature Pledge is a bold, ambitious, innovative approach to aligning all three of the UN conventions, alongside a dozen other negotiations and treaties, to put together a comprehensive vision that integrates strategically how governments, in partnership with the private and philanthropic sector, can achieve success. And that is why, over the past year, which began in May alongside the Climate COP's Global Climate Week, many of you joined us in October during the biodiversity negotiations. And again, we find ourselves here in Panama alongside CRIC 23 or the UNCCD's negotiations. But we're here to build meaningful connections that will actually lead to the partnerships that will scale those solutions at the heart of the change we all want to see. And that's why those of you are here in this room. You have been handpicked and selected because you represent a piece of the puzzle. And for the rest of the day, we're going to spotlight some of those innovations, bring together those innovators, those capital providers, and those governments spearheading transformative change. And I think the only way to properly kick this off is to have one of the key leaders spearheading the UNCCD, Ms. Andrea Mesa, Deputy Executive Secretary, someone who has been at the heart of this fight for nearly a decade and a half, formerly the Minister of Climate and Environment for Costa Rica. What she's accomplished there, she's brought across the region of Latin America and now across the globe. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Mesa.
Thank you, and good morning. Good morning, Juan Carlos, and good morning to all of you and the government of Panama. Really, my recognition for leading this effort right now. If you want to know about a country in the global context, that it is raising the bar and really bringing sometimes this not comfortable words, but really saying and what we need to hear in these multilateral processes that sometimes are too slow and sometimes are boring and sometimes it's just negotiating words for some, critical words, I will say, but words at the end to find consensus. It's Panama. So it's really my recognition and really to thank them for hosting us. We are here having one of our subsidiary bodies, which is called the CRIC. It's the body that assesses the level of implementation of our convention. Our convention, one of the three Rio conventions, the one that deals with land management, land conservation, land restoration, and also tackles drought. So it's two very critical things. And as you can imagine in this effort of how can we achieve climate goals or biodiversity goals without not really tackling land issues. And this is the big conversation, and this is what really Panama is bringing right now with their vision and their nature summit, their nature pledge as an instrument of bringing coherence, integration, because what it's really it's becoming a huge challenge at the international level is all these silos, all this idea that we want to do a systems transformation and we are not operating in this systemic way. And this is why we need to have these conversations on how to move forward, understanding that all these environmental challenges are connected. but more than that, that we're not only talking about environmental challenges, we're talking about development challenges, because this is not a question or an element if we want to do this or make money and productivity. What science is telling us is that we need to protect nature to really have resilient societies, economies, and businesses. So half of the GDP depends on nature, meaning depends on healthy land, on healthy soils as well. And what we are seeing is that these big communities, this business community, uh, I'm sure facing a lot of the challenges, droughts, heating, lack of water, and we will be hearing from the canal as well how it affects the operations, less productivity in your soils. How can we then produce our food? And more than that, a lot of different aspects that really make our living in this planet a big challenge. And this is why resilience is a critical word. And we cannot build resilience if we don't work within our planetary boundaries. And this is why this effort of the Panamanian government of really making nature part of the strategic development pathway, it's so important. And it's really an invitation to continue supporting them because it's not easy, we know. We need a lot of innovation and the technology is there, but we need to scale up solutions at a path and pace that requires investment in these areas. And we know that sometimes it's not easy for a business person to say that because our incentives and our subsidies in many cases are showing a pathway of destruction. And this is some of the elements that the governments need to do to put in place the good incentives and the good policies to make this transformation possible and the adoption of these technologies and solutions that will protect nature, will protect our land, our soils. But in this context, and really don't want to take that much time, really to thank again Juan Carlos, the minister, Juan Carlos, the special envoy, and all of you for being part of this journey. And really, we need to build and bring other partners. We have here our incoming presidency, Mongolia, who will be sharing as well their words. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is our current presidency and as well very committed to support the land efforts. And just to let you know that recently the kingdom, they committed in Riyadh $10 billion to support processes in this adoption of sustainable land management practices. But we need to have good projects, bankable projects to really unlock and mobilize that capital on the ground. And this is where I'm sure a lot of you can bring some of these ideas, innovation solutions, work with the government of Panama and other governments that are really ready to move in this direction of having prosperity, but operating within the planetary boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Executive Secretary. As Ms. Meza said, of course, Saudi Arabia hosted COP16 last year in Riyadh, and it is now a path towards Mongolia in next August. That is what makes our next speaker joining us such a privilege. We are here this week to make connections and build partnerships, but ultimately we want to see outcomes emerge. And so what we're doing this week is really building a foundation that we hope to showcase in Mongolia in August. And part of this event today is going to help not just connect you with one another, but I think in the context of finding ways that we can also align with governments and develop strategic public-private partnerships. And so with that, it's my privilege to have the chairman of the COP17 National Committee from Mongolia, Chair Batmunk Dandovdaj, join us here to give his keynote remarks. Sir.
Good morning. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to be here with you in Panama, a country that has shown strong leadership in protecting nature, oceans, forests, and in advancing environmental cooperation. I warmly thank the government of Panama for hosting the Nature Summit 2025 series, a meeting that brings together countries and communities who share one belief that the future of humanity depends on the future of nature. Here we do not gather only to speak about challenges. We gather to imagine possibilities, to share innovation, and to shape a new vision of prosperity, where nature is not sacrificed for development but becomes the foundation of it. As the upcoming presidency of UNCCT COP17, Mongolia is honored to be a part of this dialogue. We see this summit as part of a larger journey leading us all toward COP17 in Ulaanbaatar and toward stronger outcomes across the global environmental agenda. This journey includes the Rio Convention COPs, along with the UNE7 and other major milestones, of course, including the CRIC 23. Together, these moments remind us that efforts to combat a triple planetary crisis must be advanced more closely together. Countries cannot afford to treat land, water, climate, and biodiversity separately. Only through synergies can we slow degradation and move towards a nature-positive global future. Allow me to share how Mongolia hopes to contribute to this shared global effort. First, we are working to restore and protect our vast rangelands and strengthen to value chains that depend on them. Rangelands support millions of livelihoods across the world, and in Mongolia, they represent both our nomadic heritage and our future. They provide food, fiber, culture, biodiversity, and carbon storage. But these landscapes face growing pressures from climate change, from our use, and from shifting economic demands. Our work focuses on improving sustainable land management, promoting responsible livestock value chains, and supporting sustainable production of products such as cashmere wool and meat that do not harm ecosystems. By helping herding communities adopt climate-resilient practices, reducing pressure on fragile land, and modernizing value chains, we aim to show that nature-positive business models are not only possible but profitable. In protecting rangelands, we protect biodiversity, strengthening communities, and unlock significant potential for climate mitigation through increased carbon sequestration. Second, we believe land restoration cannot succeed without strong and resilient water systems. Drylands are among the world's most vulnerable regions, and water defines their survival. Our efforts focus on bringing water governance, land management, climate adaptation, and local community leadership into a single integrated approach. This includes protecting groundwater, managing aquifers, sustainable, improving monitoring and early warning systems, and addressing the growing pressures caused by extreme weather and drought. To this end, we are also aiming to strengthen public-private partnerships so that investment, technology, and community needs are aligned. When governments, businesses, and local actors work together, solutions become more practical, scalable, and long-lasting. By linking water planning with land use, agriculture, energy, and disaster resilience, we aim to create long-term stability and support the communities who are most affected. Water security is not just a technical issue, It is the foundation of sustainable land management, peace, social stability, and sustainable development across dryland regions. Third, we aim to advance nature-based solutions, but particularly in the way we plan and build infrastructure. Across the world, communities are providing the development does not need to damage ecosystems, it can restore them. We are working to promote infrastructure approaches that use natural features to protect soil, reduce floods and landslides, store water, and strengthen resilience to climate change. We believe such approaches can be designed as bankable, measurable, and investment-ready projects that offer long-term value for economies and ecosystems alike. Nature-based infrastructure is a pathway to live in harmony with the nature, not in opposition to it, and to create landscapes that are stronger, safer, and more resilient. Across all these areas, Mongolia's emerging initiatives embody our commitment to these synergies of the Rio Conventions. They bring together climate action, land restoration, biodiversity protection, and sustainable development into interconnected frameworks. They build bridges between ministries, between scientific communities, between traditional knowledge and modern innovation. This is the direction where we must move toward programs that do not sit alone but recognize the world's shared goals. Through these efforts, we aim to support a global shift where countries implement integrated solutions that deliver benefits across climate, ecosystems, and livelihoods at the same time. We also believe strongly in the role of people, especially indigenous people, youth, women, and local communities. Following the language agreed by all parties under the UNCCP, we recognize their leadership as essential for sustainable land management, climate resilience, and nature protection. They carry knowledge, responsibility, innovation, and community trust. Their contribution enriches national policies and the global dialogue alike. Empowering them is not an optional element of the environmental action, it is the condition of success. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nature Summit 2025 is more than an event. It is a reminder that choosing nature is choosing stability, choosing prosperity, and choosing peace. It is a moment for us to come together with our policies, our science, our values, and our courage to build the future we want. Mongolia warmly invites all of you to join us at COP17 in 2026. We hope it will be a COP of solutions and implementation, a COP where science meets policy, where communities meet investors, when commitments become concrete results on the ground. And above all, we hope it will be a COP that brings the Rio Conventions closer together through practical, actionable cooperation. Thank you, and I wish you a productive, inspiring, and collaborative summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So while I was on the side, I just want to let you all know, I looked up the weather in Mongolia in August. It's gorgeous. Mid-70s Fahrenheit, mid-20s Celsius. Yes, that's why you're here. That's right. No, but truly, it's. I hope for those of you who want to meaningfully be a part of an outcome-oriented COP17 in Mongolia next August, please follow up with the chairman and his team. Again, actively looking to engage with private sector leaders, philanthropic leaders, leaders of civil society, so that we can find ways to leverage our respective strengths to actually scale the solutions at the heart of why the COPs exist. Before I introduce our final speaker to kick off this opening session, who of course is our host, Juan Carlos Monterrey Gomez, I did just want to make a note. There is a gentleman who is not able to join us today. That gentleman is Mr. Rodrigo Veloso. Rodrigo is the founder and chairman of One Amazon, which is the institution at the heart of what has made the Nature Summit possible. Of course, those of you who joined us in October alongside the Nature Summit, held alongside the CBD, the Biodiversity COP, that celebrated the signing of an LOI, a letter of intent, between the government of Panama and One Amazon to develop an innovative approach to actually using technology to capture the true value of nature as a means of preserving and conserving nature at the heart of all three of these COP conventions, and doing so through an innovative, scalable model that I think the world is searching for. So I wanted to note that because otherwise Rodrigo would be the one delivering these high-level remarks. We are fortunate enough to have a spotlight on what Amazon is doing later today, but I wanted to acknowledge our anchor sponsor. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our host. All of you here know Juan Carlos Monterrey Gomez. I lavished over-the-top praise at this gentleman last night for those of you who joined our reception, but all of it, frankly, not only true, but I think for those of you who know Juan, this is one of the most authentic, courageous political leaders of our time, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. It's rare that you find someone who jumps into the fray and is willing to do what he knows is right, takes arrows from the left, from the right, from the center, but continues to step up because that's the reason why he got involved in politics in the first place. You know, Juan is someone who his first foray into politics was on the streets, leading protests and marches, calling for transformative change. And I think the world was lucky when this government embraced him, brought him inside to find a way that he could use the levers of government to actually achieve the transformative change that we all showed up here to be a part of. Juan Carlos Monterrey is, of course, a special representative for climate change for the government of Panama, but someone who's been at the heart of negotiations since he was in his mid-20s. Now he's at the ripe old age of 33. I'm pretty sure he does have gray beard. That's why he shaves his face. But look, we're all fortunate to have Juan and his leadership at the heart of the Nature Summit. So please join me in welcoming him. Juan Carlos Monterrey.
First of all, welcome to the coldest capital city of the region, as you can feel by the AC that we're having this morning. First of all, I would like to extend my greetings on behalf of Minister Navarro, who sadly could not be with us today due to the passing of his father yesterday. He sends you all a great big hug the way that he usually gives when he greets people. Distinguished leaders, partners, and defenders of the planet, if you're here today, it's not because you need to be convinced that nature matters. You already know that. You're here because the question has truly changed. The question is no longer why we must act for nature and people. The question now is how fast, at what scale, and with what results. That's what the Nature Summit is all about. Many of you have joined us before, and this is intentional. We did not invite you to hear the same speeches again. We invited you because you are part of a group that is shaping and will continue to shape what is next. Investment-ready solutions, deployable technologies, and bankable restoration with science and technology at the heart of it. As Andrea mentioned just a few minutes ago, the UN Global Review meeting on land restoration is happening just a few kilometers away. The instructions that Minister Navarro gave to our delegation was very clear. Land degradation, water stress, and ecosystem loss are no longer environmental side issues, they are economic risk. And if we really want to push the ball across the line, women leadership and local leadership must be at the center of this transformation. The gap today is not a gap on ideas. It's a gap of execution. Across country, projects are stalling because they are fragmented. and disconnected from science. Capital is waiting for clarity. Science is waiting for uptake, and communities are waiting for delivery. That disconnect is our job to fix. The multilateral system, the big bureaucracies of the national government have provided us what they have provided us thus far. But now the role that the government of Panama is assuming is a role on accelerating the leadership of the partners that we need to be accelerated for us to get to the finish line. What does that mean? A clear example. Here we are doing this event with Pro Ecuasuero, an organization that for the past years has been successful at restoring hundreds of hectares. But now our goal is for the next 24 months for ProEco to become successful at restoring thousands of hectares. That's the same kind of acceleration that we want to do with all the civil and all the private sector partners, because government cannot do this alone. The international bureaucracy cannot do this alone. The UN is so convoluted in processes and reports that cannot do this alone. So that is the main focus of the Nature Summit. Panama sees its own role very clearly, not as a showcase, not as a moderator for conversations, but as a platform where solutions move forward. And there is no better example of the transformation and systemic change that we need to push than what's happening with the Panama Canal. And that's why we're so honored to have the Deputy Administrator and the Chief Sustainability Office of the Panama Canal here with us. And on top of that, I believe, Ila, you're probably the most powerful woman in Panama. Not only, yes, not only because the role that you currently have, but the transformation that you're pushing, the systemic changes that you're pushing so that the canal remains a profitable entity for Panama and the accelerator of global trade. And in the canal, we see everything happening, and we're going to talk a little bit more that during our panel. The agenda that Panama is pushing on synergies is not a symbolic agenda. It is a real agenda. Here today, you will hear about financing structures, technologies that are being deployed elsewhere that could be deployed here, but also in other countries. And if we do our job well, you will leave this meeting with three things. Number one, the confidence that we can indeed protect nature and people, connections so that we can indeed accelerate those actions and those decisions to protect the planet and people, and opportunities that we can indeed act upon. And we are here because of the leadership of President Mulino and Minister Navarro. It was about 12 months ago that we got the incredible news that President Mulino bought into the idea that the Minister Navarro presented to him. The idea of bringing together all of our nature targets under a single vision. So it was Andrea and the Convention on the Certification, the first big international partner to believe on us and, advocate for us to be the host of what we're having this week at the Panama Convention Center. And then the minister said, we need the other two conventions to next year in Panama. So in a period of 10 months, we were not only able to bring the three biggest, most important environmental conventions in the world, but also, thanks to the support of Pro Ecuasuero and in partnership with Global Resilient Partners, we have been able to create this parallel space where we can talk about other things that are not as boring as the negotiations. I was a negotiator for 10 years, and I'm happy I'm performing at a different level and a different scale because it is cumbersome, and it takes a toll on you, physically and mentally. These people don't sleep. If you're a negotiator, you're operating on 20, 22 hours, you sleep 2 to 3 hours, you come back, maybe you sleep 4, but that's how they operate for 3 weeks. So it's a big toll. I want to thank the team at the Ministry of Environment. I want to thank our anchor supporter, Amazon, IACOM, an amazing partner that have gathered with us this year, and all the different partners and sponsors that have been with us from day one. And now to continue with this programming, I invite to the stage the Deputy Administrator of the Panama Canal, Ila Espino de Marota. And I'm going to move closer because I'm a bit far away. Done? Okay, so such an honor to have you both on stage for this open panel. Um, as I mentioned, Ilia is the Deputy Administrator of the Panama Canal, the first woman to have that role. But before that, she was also the lead engineer of the Panama Canal Expansion Project, a project that was north of $5 billion of investment. And today, we want to talk about the canal as the lab. The canal works on water. You need water for the canal to function. That water is produced by the ecosystems that we protect as a nation because it's the main driver of our economy. But over the past years, the canal has faced drought. This year, locally, we're actually facing abundance of water. We had to halve the crossings to the canal due to this drought. Ilya, talk to us a little bit more about how that experience helped push this systemic change that you now are driving with the expansion of the lakes and the new transformation to ensure that the canal serves Panamanians, but also, very importantly, continues to serve the global economy. Welcome.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you. Yeah, definitely the canal operates on rainwater. 100% we're a canal that water moves by gravity. We don't pump any water, so we depend on nature. We did see a change in the climate in the last 10 years in the canal. We had a very dry 2015, and we inaugurated the new locks in 2016, so we didn't feel the impact economically. But we saw that there was a very dry year, and we actually opened a new canal with a very shallow draft for our clients. But it was a new canal with big ships, so we had no backlash from the industry. 2019 was a dry year, and we actually started learning how to monitor water in a much better fashion, how to use less water for transiting the ships, how to measure the amount of water that we use. So we learned a lot of operational means on saving water. We started replicating the water saving basins we have in the new locks in the Panamax locks, reusing the water. Then 2023 came along, and it was the third driest year in the history of the canal, being 1997 the first. So you see from 97 to 2015, which was the second driest year in the canal, was a long gap. So 2023, the canal also provides drinking water for 50% of the population of the country, over 2 million people. And these lakes are one from 1914, one from 1935. So 2023, we were forced to drop the number of transits that could transit the canal. We went from 36 dailies to 24 dailies for a few months, and we had to give a 44-foot draft versus a 50-foot draft, which is what we offer the industry. So the Panama Canal has been managing a watershed for the last 25 years with the communities that live there. And we realized that changes in the climate, it's not enough to maintain a sustainable canal and drinking water for the population. The only reason why we had to drop the number of transits was not to impact drinking water. So that was the measure. 10 transits daily less to free the population. So we embarked in January of this year on creating a new lake, the Rio Indio Lake, which will allow us to store almost the same amount of water as Gatun Lake, but it has 1/10 the size. And we're going to work with those communities like we have been working with the communities in the traditional watershed, where we do reforestation, where we have helped the communities how to produce coffee within the forest. And we actually have now small communities that are thinking about exporting coffee that they produce. We're working with the populations on how to produce honey that provides income from them, and they protect the forest. We have a huge land titling program. We have provided over 23,000 titles to communities, people that live in these areas and don't own the land. So when you provide a land title to those communities, they have access, monetary access, to make a loan, to improve their lives, their qualities. So for us, it's very, very important to empower the communities to help them have a better quality of life while supporting the watershed, which is our livelihood for the canal and for the population. So with that, I give you a brief summary of what we do in the canal. Reforestation is a big part of it.
Thank you so much. Andrea, you are also another leader that has seen it all. You were in government, you were in civil society, you rose through the ranks of government, climate director, minister of environment and climate, now deputy secretary of a global convention that seeks to protect land. I have learned so much from this convention in the past 10 months because as climate people usually do, we just focus on climate and we don't look at anything else. But now that I was given this opportunity to lead, a wider portfolio, I have understood that what brings us all together, the synergies, is ultimately food. Food and food systems are the elements that brings all these conventions together. What is your view on the way forward in terms of synergy, and how can this initiative, Land for Business, that you're leading from UNCCD, can help us get there?
Thank you, Juan Carlos and Ilia. What a wonderful story. You really need to become as well one of these champions to tell about how this sustainable land management is critical for the business model. And the canal, I think it's a very good example on this. On these aspects on land, and we're saying when you go to a farmer, you don't talk and discuss about, oh, look what the climate goals or what the climate impacts are, or this is the biodiversity element. He is just managing his piece of land and just trying to maintain productivity, to maintain the food that they are providing. And this is what makes the land story very interesting, because I think that we are all connected to land at the end. It's not like with the climate sometimes that you have a very complex way of explaining to common people. With land, you see it. And when it is degraded, you can notice it immediately. And the impacts are very clear. When we have these healthy soils and this healthy land, it is the biggest water reservoir. And this is it as well. So land, water, this land-water nexus is just so clear there. But the important thing on these aspects, and when we try to connect this with climate as well and with biodiversity, is that in many developing countries, the biggest source of emission is land use change. And this is as well the other element, that we will not be able then to achieve our climate targets if we don't really restore, manage, and protect our lands. And this is also very connected with the biodiversity piece. At the end, you need to do this watershed management. You need to do this land use planning in any case, because of course, we're not saying you need to stop your infrastructure. No, we can do our infrastructure in the way that it is also well planned and aligned to maintain the functionality of these ecosystems. And this is what land can bring to the table. And I will just share a quick story on the decarbonization plan in Costa Rica, using the previous hat as well. And we were doing this long-term strategy to try to see with including all the sectors of the economy. And then at certain moment, within the cabinet, the Minister of Planning was saying, oh yes, this is very nice, all these targets, but how are we going to be dealing with the infrastructure, the job creation, and all these aspects that we need to see in the country as well? And we discovered that the way to bring this analysis was to use and see it in the territory. And as a country, you have just one country, and you need to bring coherence to all these different targets, from environment, but also from the development side. And this is, when you have this territorial approach, you can do this coherence analysis, the trade-offs that are sometimes needed. And I think that this is what this conventions brings. It's about land, resilience, and people, and a very people-centered approach. And in the future, and this is why, as you were saying, we are believers in synergies because we are the connectors. We know that it's not possible to continue talking about these different climate or biodiversity goals without really addressing land. And the other big element is drought. And I just want to close my remarks on drought. No country is immune to drought. And what we are seeing right now, these disruptions happening in Germany, in the Rhine, happening in the Amazon, in places that you never thought that this could happen. So as well, the other very critical thing that we advocate and work within our convention is to build drought resilience. So how to make this as well an interesting opportunity to engage businesses. So on the Business for Land, and we will be launching the Council of Champions on the Business for Land in Davos in this next January, to then have some important milestones at Mongolia, and with some of the big companies are already committed and engaging in this, to continue seeing how do we use land management as a way to build drought resilience. Because a lot of these companies, what they're saying is, we're clear that we need to start taking measures to be better prepared for the next drought, because it's coming, it's going to be more with more frequency and bigger in time and impact. So it's very important, and we see the business community as well, very clear understanding and saying we are going to take measures, and they are doing incredible things in that path.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much, Ilya, for these fantastic interventions. And now, to conclude our panel, we have another powerful woman coming onto stage, Hindu Omaru, the co-chair of the International Indigenous People Forum on Climate Change. She's going to give us some closing remarks. Welcome, Hindu.
I love people, and this is also what we do about the biodiversity. So, good morning or afternoon, I don't know. Hi, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be with you in this Biodiversity Summit. And thank you so much, actually, for organizing that during the CREAT, the UNCCD meeting here. And this is also one of the connection I can say when we talk about the biodiversity is not in a singular way. We talk about the interconnectiveness of all the ecosystem, and that's also why we have to talk about land. We have to talk about the climate. And I hear my sister Andrea, when she was speaking about the climate and biodiversity at the same time, representing these conventions. But today, allow me to speak as an indigenous woman, not as vice chair of Permanent Forum or climate or whatever, just like as an indigenous woman. As indigenous women, we always say in our communities, we are nature. We are part of the nature. We are not like nature here, we are separately. We are only one species of this nature. That means we are the species of the biodiversity who can help them to keep in balance. But for so long, we have been asking for the recognitions of the indigenous peoples, and we have been listening from many. We have been listening on biodiversity. When beyond the Article 8G, we have the body now that are discussing to see how we can be more fairly into the implementation. We have been listening on the Paris Agreement, where we get the 5 references of indigenous peoples. But so far, just the last days, I can say even not a week, in Belém, we have nature as an entire part of the climate negotiations. We have been listening into the UNCCD conventions, because in the last COP16 of desertification in Riyadh, for the first time we have the Indigenous Peoples Caucus officially, and also the local communities caucus that have been adopted. And we are here today, actually at 6, we are going to have the first consultation with all the member states. Of course, thank you. Of course, listening our voices and putting us in this spot have taken us a long way. Still, despite all these recognitions, indigenous people's territories are violated because of the new maybe result of the climate we are saying to the critical minerals that are harming the biodiversity. It's still the indigenous peoples who are fighting for the land are getting killed. It's still the climate impact are raising. So we are losing our land, we are losing our biodiversity. Recognition is one thing, but how we can accelerate action, this is what we want. And I think this is all about the summit and about what you hear from the science, from the policies, and from the government who wanted to do good, as my brother Juan here said. So over thousands of years, indigenous peoples have been protecting those ecosystems for free. We are protecting it with our blood. We are the stewardship of the land. The report said, but I'm not talking about the report. I'm talking about the evidence. In my own communities, I'm coming from a nomadic pastoralist people, where we live between Chad, Cameroon, Niger, Nigeria, Central African Republic, and Sudan. In all the land that we live, our diversity of ecosystems are more than a national park, because we know how to keep the balance. We know how to respect the bears and the ant. We know how to live in harmony with the lion and elephant. We are still alive there, of course. So those knowledge are so important to protect the biodiversity. We do have them in the paper, but how we can turn them into the national policies, into the programs, into the plan and project in order to help us accelerate action. This is really what we want. And having the summit with all the member states, but also the business, the philanthropy, is making sure that we are moving from the talk to the action, making sure that the policy that we have good are implemented, making sure when we lacking policies to make it differently, to have the synergy. Synergy in the policy, synergy into the action. It is the same Ministry of Environment who are dealing with climate, with biodiversity, with the land. It has to be the same people who can take the same policies at the national level. It has to be the same peoples who can put the language of indigenous peoples in the text, not giving the different perspective in a different convention. That time is past. We wanted to look at the future with a synergy that can help us to move to the action. This is what indigenous peoples are doing, the holistic view, how we can give back to the nature. But allow me to say that without a real finance, we cannot live to the action. I know you can say like everyone is talking, yes, we need finance, we need finance. I'm not talking about numbers. I'm not talking about the commitment. I'm talking about the real cash in the tables that can go to the communities who are the doers. Our grandmothers and grandfathers, maybe they didn't went to school. Maybe they cannot have the PhD in the paper, but they are professor and PhD plus on the land restoration, on the tree plantations. They are PhD plus on how they can protect their communities, ensure the food sovereignty, not food security, to ensure the futures of all of us, not only their children. So how we can give them confidence and give them a direct access finance. And when I talk about direct access finance, I'm not talking about give our communities 5,000 or 10,000. This is a salary of an individual just during a month, or 100,000. This is a 1 year salary of an individual. We wanted to have the millions that they committed about it, the billions that they committed about it. If we can protect a land, we can protect a trees, we can of course manage the funding. So just the way of management is different. We wanted the trust, we wanted this funding to go to our peoples, and we wanted you to go to our land to witness the result. This is what we need right now. And I hope this summit can help us to move from the talk to the action, and to move to the trust and confidence, and to give our communities a funding. Imagine before I come, we replanted 11,000 of indigenous trees in my communities. We do not think about the carbon market that is getting today. We are thinking about how many years, by 20 years, what our children can benefit from it. So we are building the future. And indigenous people's knowledge are not the past. We are the present. Technology can help, science can help, but our knowledge are adapting, they are helping all of us. So please have that in mind. Policies, finance, need indigenous peoples who are the doers. So we are all one. Build the trust and let's do the summit, not a checking box, but a real step forward to our planet and his peoples. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's take a picture.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, Indu. Thank you so much, Ilya. Thank you so much, Andrea. We're just gonna take a picture before you all leave.
Thank you so much. Okay. Bueno, avísame. Nos vemos. Chao.
Thank you, Juan, for guiding that compelling conversation. You know, before that session, I wanted to put a spotlight on the anchor sponsor who made all this possible, One Amazon, which is going to be the focus of this next high-level fireside chat. We are fortunately joined by Jaime Nino, Senior Vice President of AECOM for Latin America. For those of you who don't know, I'm sure many of you do, AECOM is one of the, if not the, global leader in infrastructure development firms around the world. I actually, from Dallas, Texas, born and raised, where the global headquarters is based. And we're fortunate to have Jaime join us to lead this conversation. He'll be joined by Michael Christensen, CEO of CK Americas, who's a global leader in maritime logistics, port strategy, and supply chain decarbonization. The two of them are really going to highlight some of the innovative approaches to solving the global crises that we face, and of course in the context of how One Amazon, as an innovative approach to financing, can help invest and scale those solutions. With that said, please join me in welcoming Jaime and Michael.
Let's see. Okay. So yes, CEO of CK Americas is a big title for a single person company, but I'm probably here. Jaime can correct me. I'm probably here more because I worked about 35 years in the maritime industry. So what I look at is primarily about shipping, everything related around shipping. Resisted talking about the Panama Canal because we had Ilya here, and as I just told her, I expect that we will soon erase part of her title, the deputy part. But yeah, let's see. Maybe it's up for next year. I hope so. And of course, she's also, the way I would have presented her was actually she's also in charge of sustainability for the Panama Canal. So very, very involved in that and very relevant for that. So my quick history is I spent 25 years in a big shipping company all over the world. I'm originally from Denmark, but later spent time in the U.S., in Brazil, in Singapore, Uruguay, Russia. Fortunately, not there anymore. And then also a bit of time in Japan, and then finally here in Panama, where I am residing now for the past 17 years. I think we're going to focus in on some of the fuel challenges that ships have.
I have a few questions for you on that.
Okay, see,
Okay.
I'm like, he's supposed to moderate this, and I'm jumping right in. So I'll shut up for a little while and let Jaime speak.
No, but your point is well taken. One of the interesting things that Michael brings to this opportunity in this conversation is the fact that he's been working with the shipping industry throughout the world, looking at how it has evolved, and has been here in Panama now for quite some time, looking at the challenges that the shipping industry is facing, the challenges that the Panama Canal is facing, and how all of it, in some way or another, is directly linked to the challenges we're facing on a global scale, with climate, with nature, and obviously with how we can collaborate among private sector, public sector, to respond to the challenges we're facing. I'm going to start just a few minutes. I'm going to talk a little bit about One Amazon. Two of our panelists could not make it due to logistics. One is Rodrigo Veloso, who's the CEO and founder of One Amazon, and who has given us the opportunity to, as AECOM, to work for One Amazon in launching One Amazon. I'm going to move aside for a minute so I can show you guys a couple of slides, which is a little bit out of the program, but I'll just do it for a second, because what I'm going to explain is not necessarily straightforward. And I say this because I'm an economist and have dealt with the challenges of working in difficult environments such as the Amazon, initially under Plan Colombia, when AECOM was hired by USAID for over almost 15 years to work on substitution of illicit crops in Colombia. Okay, so a major challenge with illegal markets in the Amazon, with the challenges that communities face all the time, every day, and that a lot of people, do not see. And at the same time, and we heard it just a minute ago, how our indigenous communities every day are providing ecosystemic services that allow us to wake up and, for instance, see the environment we're seeing. If the Amazon was not around, the entire water cycle of the Western Hemisphere would be severely disrupted, affecting and creating major droughts throughout all of the Western Hemisphere with a huge economic impact. So when Rodrigo came into my office in Coral Gables and said, hey, I want to hire AECOM because I've got this idea of launching a financial asset to work in the Amazon, my initial reaction, and I said, what kind of financial asset are you talking about? He said, I'm launching a token. And that minute, I said, trouble. I should probably finish this meeting now. A token, and it's probably a carbon play and greenwashing. So I was going to finish the meeting right there. I listened, and I'm glad I did listen through his presentation. And then I've been working with him, going throughout the 9 Amazonian countries and Panama, talking about One Amazon and learning about the concerns that governments have, that communities have, the challenges they're facing, and at the same time, being AECOM, a infrastructure and environment services firm, looking at the opportunities to deploy capital, not only to preserve the Amazon, and in the case of Panama, to preserve Darien, but also to bring other solutions. And I'm going to give you a few examples, and one of them very specific and linked to the maritime industry. So really quickly, I want to explain this, and just because Rodrigo is not around, what Rodrigo and an entire team has put together that's really interesting is they have come up with the idea of creating a digital asset that does not tokenize the land. It does not tokenize biodiversity. It does not tokenize specific products. It's a digital asset that tokenizes a voluntary preservation agreement between the landowners, mostly governments, who own the natural parks, but also sometimes indigenous communities who have their community lands, and a great minority private lands, but mostly government lands. And right now we're focused 100% on government lands. And what Amazon does is it works with governments on a voluntary, non-exclusive preservation agreement. And that is what's being taken as the first regulated, listen to this, regulated digital asset, first regulated digital asset approved by the SEC, okay, and it will be a nature asset. The first regulated digital asset will be a nature asset approved by the SEC to finance conservation, restoration, and energy transition in the 9 Amazonian countries and Panama. Okay? And the reason this is interesting is because we all know that we face multiple challenges, right? And Matt said at the beginning, we've got to do more in less time and with less resources. I disagree on one of those words. I actually don't think we have less resources. I actually think we have not tapped into all of the resources we can tap into. We have plenty of resources, okay? By the way, very interesting talking about resources, the way Rodrigo looks at things, and the reason One Amazon is called One Amazon is because one for Rodrigo means opportunities never end. So the interesting thing is we have a lot of people around the world that today are sitting on excess cash, $1, $10, $100, $1 million, $100 billion. And everybody thinks that the only way to contribute is through donations, and that's not necessarily true. People can contribute and can invest. And what One Amazon is trying to unlock is the opportunity for everybody to invest initially because it's regulated, initially through institutional funds. So it's got to go through investment funds, ETFs and so on, and pension funds. But everybody can invest in the conservation and protection of the Amazon. So what One Amazon does then, and I'm going to go into this for a minute, is every time the digital asset of that preservation agreement is sold, and by the way, that's a non-exclusive preservation agreement, so the government can still receive donations on that natural park, can still concession the natural park if so they wish. They can do any number of activities on the park, and the preservation agreement does not change the land use or the property or the governance or the authority of the government over the park. It's just a voluntary MOU that preserves, that commits the government to do its best efforts to preserve that park. So every time the token is sold, and the first tokens that are being sold are for Coralino 1 and Coralino 2 in Brazil, two major parks in one of the most degraded lands in Brazil, in Mato Grosso. 70% of the funding goes to an impact fund. That does exactly what we were talking a while ago. We need to put projects together. So it works with communities on their ideas in a napkin, as I say, to put it together so that it can be funded by One Amazon and other sources of funding and finance. The second thing is 15% goes immediately as a contribution to the landowner, in this case the government, so that they can have more resources to preserve the land. In the case of Brazil, very interesting, the conversation with the government of Brazil is about using that 15% to fund TFFF, to generate additional funding for TFFF. Other governments are thinking about allocating it into other types of funds, okay? But it's got to be used for the preservation of nature and the natural parks. The third source of funding, the other 15%, is deployed in creating what's called the Internet of Forests, which is a system that allows us to monitor top-down nature and bottom-up with sensors how those parks and the land where One Amazon invests is being preserved, and having all the information on the ecosystemic services that are being provided by that hectare of land transparently reported to the market and to investors who are putting their funds into the tokens. And to create an incentive so that governments continue to preserve those parks forever, 1% of every transaction of the One Amazon token in the market is immediately transferred to the landowner as long as they are preserving the park. So the governments receive a source of funding forever. The fund is also an evergreen fund, so the fund never ends. The funds created will always be investing in preservation of the Amazon and nature. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this to open up the conversation. So what are the projects that right now we're looking to fund? And I'll give 3 examples. One of the projects that we're looking to fund is 2,000 gigabytes of solar power energy in Colombia and Brazil to produce the largest supply of green aluminum in the world for Mercuria metals. So we will be generating with EDF of France 2 gigawatts of energy to produce green aluminum, completely zero emissions aluminum. The second project we're working on, unfortunately Laura could not join us today, is the biochar program. The biochar program that we want to implement, of which one of them we want to do here in Panama, in Chiriquí, is to take biomass waste from the coffee industry to produce biochar so that we can use that biochar in putting carbon back to the soil and regenerating degraded lands in Azuero. So that's the second program we're doing, and with Laura, we're already working on a very large biochar program in woodlands in Brazil. So it's a proven technology with a proven solution delivering biochar to restore degraded lands in Mato Grosso, in Coralino 1 and Coralino 2. And the third program we want to do, and this takes me directly to Kristen, is we want to invest in green methanol, and we want to invest in synthetic LNG to supply alternative fuels to the maritime industry. So, and that is specifically is something we want to do in Colón and Panama. And we've been looking at that for some time on how we can do that, and we think that we can integrate our biomass programs and biochar programs to generate the biogas that we need for synthetic LNG and green methanol. So thinking about Panama and the maritime industry, I want you to tell us a little bit, based on your experience, what are the challenges that the maritime industry is seeing today in Panama to potentially accelerate their transition to lower carbon emissions?
By turning on this one. All right. I think that the first challenge, and all of you are more experts in the environment than I am. I think one of the first challenges is let's stop talking zero emissions. Let's talk less emissions, because as soon as we move the goal line to at least less emissions, we have something that we can actually achieve. Zero emissions, we are nowhere near it. I mean, we have a carbon-fueled economy. We can't really change that overnight. So more realistic goals, I think is important. On the maritime industry, I think synthetic LNG is a dream. Also because a lot of the shipping lines, shipping companies are investing in LNG technology today, which means that it could be an easy transition. We are just missing one thing: supply. There is no, we have a couple of handfuls of synthetic LNG, so we can't fuel more than a few ships. The same thing was what was tried a couple of years ago with the green methanol. The supply is just not there, and at the end of the day, I think the overall discussion on the environment goes back to if it doesn't make economically sense, everybody in this room is going to go in the right direction. They're going to root for the environment. But, there's billions of people out there that can't afford to do that. They're going to vote for their kids, and so it needs to make economic sense as well for everybody, not just for, a few million people in the world that can actually choose to make the right decision, if you will. And we have to do. We have, don't know how many you have, Jaime, but I have 2 kids, and I hope that they will have grandkids at one point, and I want them to have a planet that they can live on. But going back to shipping in particular, I think there's 2 aspects to shipping. One is very much against what I've been working for my whole life, and that is, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we shipping that much stuff around? Seriously, it's like when I got the invitation here, I mentioned that I had just been to my freezer and figured out that I had frozen strawberries made in Egypt. In Egypt. That's like, we produce strawberries in Panama. I live in Panama. We produce that primarily close to the border with Costa Rica. Why do I have strawberries from Egypt in my freezer? I didn't even know that they were from Egypt. I try to buy local whenever I can, but this must have missed the mark, right? Why is Panama exporting meat to Japan and importing meat from the U.S. or Argentina or Brazil? Why is that actually taking place? So we as consumers have a real responsibility also at looking at why the shipping markets are as big as they are. That also goes with, you're talking about coal, and not all countries can produce enough to feed their populations. But jumping back into the fuel part, it's really a question of affordable supply. And synthetic LNG, green methanol, it's just not there. Ships cannot be powered by electricity except for short distances. You just can't put that size of batteries on a ship that needs to, be sailing for the next 10 days without a supply. It's not possible. Short distances in Europe, barges, that kind of stuff, it's an option. It's an option, and it's something that's being developed. Nuclear energy may be an option. But we are always afraid of nuclear energy. It doesn't kill as many people as our other fuel supplies, but yeah.
You bring an excellent point, which is affordability, right? We have a major challenge in how do we make these challenges affordable. And that's one side of it, which I think is really important, which is technology change and making affordable. I was talking to Jason Smeeks, who's helping us do a number of studies here in Panama on logistics. And Jason said, Jaime, we should look at hydrogen, green hydrogen in the Caribbean basin. And I said, why? I mean, I've been looking at that for some time, and it's non-affordable. And he said, you'd be shocked how the price of green hydrogen is coming down very fast, because the price of solar panels has come dramatically fast, and of electrolyzers has also come down very fast. And then I was shocked. We just finished a major energy study for the 9 Amazonian countries, and we found out that solar was the fastest growing supply of energy in all of the 9 countries. And really interesting, the cost of solar was almost matching the cost of hydro in several countries, which we would have thought unthinkable just 3 or 4 years ago. So so I do think that that technological change is happening extremely fast. I was talking to one of the companies that's doing the small nuclear solutions for data centers and for ships, and they were telling me that they think they will be ready at scale, level 9 production, in 2029. So it's really interesting because it is happening. The technological change is accelerated. We're not seeing it all right there, but it is moving forward in an interesting way. The other interesting solution that, to your point, that is very interesting is how you can match, and when we were looking at green methanol, we were looking at CO2 emissions coming out of the cement industry and the LNG powered facilities to capture the CO2 and mix it with water and green hydrogen to produce green methanol. And it turns out that Colón has apparently interesting opportunities to do that because of the AES facility right in Colón. So at this point, as I said, we're looking at taking a napkin ideas and starting to put resources. We're going to be putting resources in Panama into looking at the feasibility of doing green methanol or doing synthetic LNG to see if that is something that we can do, because Panama is definitely a point where all the shipping industry goes through. And obviously Maersk, who's been very committed to this, has a major ambition of reducing carbon emissions. Let me turn.
I can't talk for Maersk anymore.
I know. That's why I'm not really. But let me ask you something. The other part that's really interesting is a lot of these industries, and particularly the maritime industry, understanding their challenge in reducing carbon emissions, have been investing in carbon credits. And for instance, the Panama Canal does a lot of protection of the watershed and issues carbon credits that are well backed by data. But have you heard, or in your conversations with the maritime industry, have you ever had discussions on their interest or the difficulty they're facing in finding good quality carbon credits to offset their carbon footprint?
I think the challenge on carbon credits is simply that there's no global framework for it. So each of these shipping lines are working on relatively small margins at all times, even in the best of times. And they have to be competitive, which means they are looking to the cost. So, you're looking at basic oil versus LNG today, and you get a 35% discount.
Yeah.
Even when you take into consideration that LNG is not clean in any way, shape, or form, right? The ships have what you call the med slip, which basically make it as dirty as bunker oil. Even when you take into account the reduced power that LNG carries for a ship, you're talking about a 30-35% reduction in cost. And if you're making a margin of 10%, you can't be in the game. Now, if there was a global framework for it, where everybody was on equal playing ground, at least within like certain industries, if everybody was on that even playing ground, then yes, a lot of people would buy into it. But that's just not the case. And at the end of the day, when we look at shipping companies, let's just remember something else. All of us sitting in this room, how much more are we and the other billions of people on this planet willing to pay more for shipping? The answer in the 35 years that I've been in business has been zero. Nobody's willing to pay more. And when it's nobody, it's easy to point fingers, but nobody is me, it's you, you. If we are not willing to pay more for it, then we need to do something different. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was, of course, we could start thinking about like not buying strawberries from Egypt. I'm certainly not doing it anymore, but and I was shocked that I did. But there are these kind of things that are driving a lot of stuff around. But it needs to be cheaper. Green methanol, I think it's a great concept, but it needs to be significantly cheaper than it is today to compete with the alternatives. All right, we'll shift again.
I'll wrap up, but look, I want to end the conversation with this simple message. We do have to break. I mean, we do face these challenges, and we do have to find ways to make these solutions affordable and scalable. Okay, if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to solve the challenges we're facing. But I want to highlight, and I want to end with, look, 20 years ago when I started working in the Amazon, the option of bringing finance to the Amazon was extremely challenging. Everything had to be moved in cash. And moving cash was asking a community to get on a boat for 2 days to the nearest ATM machine. Today, we have technological solutions that allow us to issue digital assets that will democratize access to and opportunities for investment and finance. We have the opportunities today to provide internet connectivity using satellites that allow us to provide internet coverage in the Amazon. The cost of satellites has come down dramatically. And today, the cost of images, satellite images, and the quality of the images and the technology is much better. Today, we have on-the-edge solutions that allow us to capture data on the ground and have it in real time analyzed using AI to identify events in the Amazon. And then I also think we have to break silos. And I'll give you an example. I was talking yesterday with our team, with the One Amazon team, the ACOM team working for One Amazon, and we were talking, and they were telling me, Jaime, but we need to tell investors that they got to take a percentage of their return on investment and put it into a donation, because we're not going to be able to fund many projects with indigenous communities. And I said, that's not true. That's not true. And I gave one example that Rodrigo showed me the other day. He took a design by the Shuar community, gave it to Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton built on that design of the Shuar community, so it's all intellectual property of the Shuar community, and created a bracelet with other materials, not coming from the Amazon. Could have used materials from the Amazon, but it was different materials. It was just simply sold in Louis Vuitton. Every one of those bracelets is selling for $30,000. The Chuar community is taking $25,000 of every one of those bracelets. So it's not true that we cannot make sustainable investments and that we cannot make partnerships that can generate sustainable sources of revenue. We have other challenges working with the communities, but we have to break some of our mental silos. And one of the biggest ones, to me, a big concern is, and I've heard this say multiple times, either those who believe in the market that do not trust governments to deliver solutions and particularly deliver solutions, for instance, with communities in the Amazon. And on the other hand, those that do not trust the market as a possibility to generate opportunities and finance. And I'm going to finish with this. The reason One Amazon works, despite taking 30% of the revenues out of the investment fund, so investors don't get 100% of their investment, they only take 70%, and they get the dividends for 70% of the investment, is because it benefits from the appreciation of the token, because it's got the same scarcity that nature has. 750 million hectares in the Amazon, that's all there is. 150 million of the 750 have been deforested, and we need to recover them. We need to restore them, right? So it's got the same scarcity that any other token, any other digital token has out there, like Bitcoin, but this one has a purpose, and it's regulated. So I do think that we can come up, and this is just one example. Another example that we were discussing a few days ago with One Amazon and a government is we are destroying the rivers of the Amazon with illegal gold mining. It's destroying the rivers of the Amazon. And what do we do with that gold? What does our communities do with the gold? What do we do with the gold? We put it in vaults. We keep it as gold in vaults. We take it out of the rivers, its natural vault, and we put it in another vault. Why do we do that? When we could keep it in the rivers. We could value it in the river and trade it digitally in the market. Central banks could be buying digital gold. Why do we need to trade it? Why do we need to extract it out of its natural vaults? We don't have to do that. And those are solutions that the market today allows us to do, and technology. So I wanted to bring that up because I do think that we face major challenges, and it's time that we all try to work together, private sector, public sector, NGOs, academia, to come up with solutions. And I do think we have much more resources than we're leveraging. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. And Michael, thank you so much for your contribution.
Take your time when I finally have a working microphone. I don't know if it's working.
And actually, Michael, Jaime, please take a seat just for one moment. I did want to just open this up and add a couple questions. To begin with, Jaime, obviously there's a steep learning curve for governments to really understand the value of the nature-based assets that they're sitting on. As you and One Amazon have engaged governments across Latin America, what would you say has been the biggest challenge and barrier to getting governments to understand the innovative approach that One Amazon is taking and how that represents a financial solution both to the Sustainable Development Goals but also to the conservation objectives?
Thank you for that question. It's really interesting. So I would say that I've seen three things that are of great concern to governments. The first one is there is obviously a natural distrust today with tokens and digital assets in general because of the reputation of scams, financial scams, and so on. So the first reaction is the same reaction I had when Rodrigo walked into my office and I said, oh my God, another scam, right? So, I mean, literally, we started working with One Amazon by stepping in, like when you're walking into the coolest pool in the world, that's how we started working with One Amazon. Extremely distrustful at the beginning until we had a good understanding of that this was a real asset, the players that were behind it, so Goldman Sachs, and it gets traded through the Goldman Sachs platform, it's regulated and so on. The second thing that is a major concern to governments, and I understand them, is obviously the property of the parks. So it took a while, and it takes a while to understand that you're not tokenizing the property, that you're not giving up any sovereignty, that you are not conditioning the land use of the park. All you're doing is signing a voluntary preservation agreement for 30 years. And interestingly, then comes another part. It doesn't cost the government a dime. The government receives funding. But because it receives funding, a contribution, it creates a new set of problems. So governments are not ready and are not prepared to receive contributions if they're not tax contributions. And again, another silo that we got to break. So that brings another layer of complexity, contralorías and so on, because now you're taking money and so on, and where are you going to put the money and how are you going to use it and all of that part. The third one that we've encountered, and it's extremely valid, is the issue of genetic material in the Amazon. Concern about genetic material and the data that's produced by Internet of Forest. And so just quickly, let me tell you that we've been working with Rodrigo and One Amazon to put the highest standards to the extent that we work now with IDB. We've created a partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank, and the standards that One Amazon has are higher than the standards of the IDB in terms of ownership of data, in terms of, in other words, the data belongs to the governments. The data does not belong to One Amazon. One Amazon collects it, but it belongs to the government. It does use it to report the ecosystemic services that are being provided, but it does not use it to gather genetic material. If governments want to improve on the network and gather genetic material, they can do that. And One Amazon can invest with governments on collecting that data, and the data will always belong to governments or to the indigenous community. And the last thing is obviously the safeguards related to indigenous communities. So we obviously follow all the ILO principles in terms of consultation with communities, but we are very focused on how do we improve and how do we work on the way we interact with communities. And to be very frank, we're not ready yet to work in indigenous community lands, and that's why we haven't focused initially on the natural parks, on government-owned land. We can work with indigenous communities, but we want to carefully understand how best to work on indigenous community lands to avoid having negative impact. So those have been the challenges that we faced. And I think all of the questions, if I talk about our conversations with Susana Mohamed and the government of Colombia, the conversations with the government in Peru, with the government in Guyana, in Suriname, I mean, it's all been very interesting. And I think it's been very important to help us put a very significant set of guiding principles and honestly tying the hands of the fund so that we make sure that it always does the right thing. Let me just finish by one thing. The owner of the fund is not One Amazon. One Amazon only creates the fund. The owner of the fund are the investors. And the fund has a governing system that is managed by individuals that are independent of One Amazon, that are there in the investment committee because they are either highly reputed for their work on environment or for their work on impact finance or for their work with indigenous communities, but not because they are close or associated with One Amazon.
Thank you, Jaime. And I think we may have time for just one or two more
Yeah,
Take it.
I'll give you an example to your question that I think, I do think that it matters. And you're right, we're seeing it with the hyperscalers in data centers. But let me give you an example of the shipping, of the maritime industry, not the shipping industry. I've been working with Royal Caribbean about securing shore power in several of the islands of the Caribbean, as well as in Panama. And we work with the Port of Miami, the Port of Everglades, and previously with the Port of Long Beach in putting shore power. So they have told us very clearly that they are willing to sign 30-year commitments to acquire or purchase shore power on the port, on the cruise port terminals. So it is doable. You're right. It's a very critical part of it.
My answer is going to go towards no. Are they ready? No. I think that, one of the issues that we are facing is that shipping, the maritime business, is global. And that means that you need more than just a single place, Miami, Port Everglades. They're definitely committed to shore power. The U.S. is pushing into shore power. It means very, very little. You also have a lot of ports that are pushing into using electricity instead of, carbon-based fuels, and that's fine. But the problem is, much of that fuel, much of that electricity is generated by fuel. It's just not our problem, not invented here. We're just pushing it over to someone else. And a lot of the electricity generation in this region here is generated by fuel. So it is, of course, one step of the way, and that's also what I was talking about earlier, that we have to get away from this whole zero emission discussion and say, how can we make incremental steps instead? But big investments by shipping companies in any part of the different segments that exist. They're not they're going to be nervous about it because they don't know if you are a shipping company from Japan. You don't know whether the Japanese rules is one thing and the Chinese rules are going to be another thing. So a regulatory framework that makes it equal for everybody is key to some of this stuff. And giving people the confidence to actually invest in it long term. 30 years is a long time. You could totally do that. You could totally do that. You could do it on a regional basis, on a country basis. You could totally do that, as California have done. It's not U.S.-wide quite yet, but very, very familiar with California. My daughter lives there. I think at the end of the day, it comes back to something that I brought up earlier, that someone is going to have to pay for this. And if you're living in California, you're paying for it. Fortunately for you, so much of the cargo coming through California goes to other states, so other states will help you too. But someone have to pay for it. I don't think shipping companies per se are against this. I think that they have big departments looking at how they can improve on the environment. Some of it is also to their benefit, right? It's efficiency on the ships, lowering their fuel costs and so forth. But it just has to be equal for everybody. So in the case of California, it is equal for anyone. You want to call Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, Huneme, San Diego, whatever. Everybody's equal, and that's a good breeding ground for change. So regulatory stuff is really important here.
My biggest concern with regulation, I'm not against it. Okay, I understand the need for regulation, but my biggest concern, and I'll be very frank, is it's always a challenge to do it purely driven by governments. And again, I fully understand market failures. I fully understand the need for regulation, but I'm very concerned about the political cycles and how it's impacting our global agenda. Okay, so while I'm happy and abide by any regulatory requirements. I think we still have to continue to find ways to invest and promote technologies and solutions that help us ultimately make affordable other alternative fuels and solutions to the challenges we're facing. And I tell this to my team all the time. I think we're living in exciting times. I'm optimistic by nature, and I do think we're living in optimistic times. I think what we're going through in terms of technological change is only similar to the technological change that many of our grandparents or great-grandparents went through at the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century. I mean, it's just changing everywhere, the technology and how it's impacting everything. And so I'm seeing how digital solutions are shaping a lot of the things we're doing. I'm seeing how AI is helping AECOM do much better designs than we used to do, and what normally took us 2 months. And it's not reducing employment. It is just allowing every one of our engineers to have 3 AI partners helping do the work every day. So I am thrilled by technology change. And I'm telling everybody in our teams in AECOM, let's embrace it because we can have a greater impact. So, and I told you guys on the energy side, I'm just shocked to see that we can produce cheaper aluminum in Brazil and Colombia than we produce anywhere in the world, and it's green. The cost of our of energy in Brazil and Colombia, solar power energy with EDF of France, is 6 cents the kilowatt. 6 cents the kilowatt. 8 cents lower than hydro.
But you're going to need met coal from Colombia to produce it in Brazil, right?
I know we are, but
I agree with most of what you say, Jaime. I kid with my, I'm kidding with my kids when I say, hey, there's a real problem here. But unfortunately, I'll be dead before it needs to be dealt with. But yeah, they can deal with it, or the grandchildren can. But on the point of regulatory, I completely agree, because we cannot, I think one of the big problems that we have is regulatory, because we can't depend on governments staying along and keeping the same line for the number of years that we need to actually affect change, right? So it needs to be private business and concerned citizens that are actually making this happen.
Yeah. All right, guys. If there are no questions.
Thank you, Jaime.
You do have one? Okay. Sure. Sure. So that's actually a really good question, because it came up here in Panama. So, there are a number of studies that have valued the impact of the Amazon. And one of them is a study by Boston Consulting Group that basically indicates that the value of the Amazon is $37 trillion. So when you take those $37 trillion and you divide them by the whole ecosystemic services of the Amazon, if it went away, the impact is $37 trillion. So if you divide that by the 750 million hectares roughly, you're looking at about $48,000 per hectare. And one Amazon with Coralino 1 and Coralino 2 is valued at $1,000. So it's valued at a much lower value than the $48,000 that the token has. However, $1,000 per hectare is much more than what normally the government of Brazil is paying for ecosystemic services to communities in Brazil. And the interesting thing, the interesting effort, is the investors benefit from the appreciation of the token, which is going to be very much driven by reputation, by the quality of the investments. But the other part is that they benefit from the dividends of the investments. So with for instance, on the green aluminum project with EGA of the Emirates and EDF of France, one Amazon is taking a developer fee of 10x on its investment. But on other investments in biochar, the return on investment is around 12%. So ultimately, the investors will benefit from the dividends of the fund, and they will benefit from the appreciation of the token in time. That's kind of the economics of this. Okay.
Thank you.
Let me, sorry, 2 seconds. The economics of the token is driven by two things, right? What does Bitcoin have today that makes it traded? One is
Drug smuggling.
What did you say?
Money laundering.
Yeah. So one of the things is it has a blockchain technology that has worked out quite well. The second thing is it's traded broadly, right? And yes, for sure it has a lot of problems with the KYC, know your investor. Yeah, the mining as well. But the interesting thing is essentially that it's scarce and that it's broadly traded. That's what drives its value. The key thing we're trying to do with One Amazon is it's got the scarcity of nature, but the key thing is, can we make it broadly traded? And making it broadly traded is driven by the fact that it is regulated and accessible to all the major ETFs. So that's what we're trying to do, and we'll see if it succeeds. Obviously, it's a bet, but so far so good. We've got over $3 billion in investor commitments today.
Everyone, please join me in thanking Jaime and Michael with a little fireside chat.
Thank you.
For our next high-level fireside chat, we are joined by Hita Lakhani, who is the chief correspondent for SDG News. SDG News is the official media partner for the Nature Summit. And Kailea Beckman. Kailea is the founding partner for Peace Through Trade blockchain and the most recent 2025 SDG Leader Award winner who was recognized at the United Nations during the UN General Assembly this past September. Please join me in recognizing and celebrating Hita and Kailea.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, if it's still morning, is it? Good afternoon. Today we have with us a very special person. We have Kailea Beckman, and of course, as Matt mentioned, she's the founding partner of Peace to Trade. Before I say anything about her, Kailea, can you introduce yourself a little bit to us?
Sure. Hi. My name is Kailea Beckman, founding partner of Peace Through Trade, alongside my husband, Arai Beckman, and our other partner, CTO at the university professor, David Burke, in the university group in Southeast Asia. So we're here today to talk about our project, very exciting, sustainable blockchain project.
Kailea, before we get into the depth of the discussion, can you tell me a little bit on what is Peace Through Trade, what inspired you to found it, and what are the principles that you've based it on?
So Peace Through Trade started as a layer 2 token for equitable access to finance. And if you're not familiar, a layer 2 token is a token that's built on a different blockchain. And at the time, my husband and I, we were dabbing, playing with cryptocurrencies and on other chains and participating in that way. And we were phished. We lost everything. And there was no recourse. There was no insurance. There was no customer service. It was devastating, honestly. And it really made us rethink what we were creating and what we were putting out to the world. And it caused us to pivot entirely from doing a layer 2 token for equitable access to a token to a layer 1, which is a container like an Ethereum or a Bitcoin that, with the university group, our business partner who is our dear friend and who is supporting us in our dreams and fulfilling, making finance equitable for everyone. With his, all of his students and the university groups, we analyzed all of the different blockchains that existed, and we cherry-picked, I want to say, the best qualities of each, and we developed our own. And so with Peace Through Trade, we cover the most important things for us, which is, something that's easy to use, number one, because I don't know if you're familiar, but the current blockchain world can be quite difficult, to get involved and to use that system. Something that follows a regulatory framework, so that allows for insurance and security and trust. So those were the main points that really drove us to create our system. And in that, we also then created a blockchain that was very sustainable. That was also something actually very important that I forgot to mention. Because the current legacy systems, they are not very sustainable. And for example, Bitcoin right now, today, uses about 16 nuclear power plants worth of energy a year. And that can, that's not ideal. And if you were to compare apples to apples, our system would be 0.8 of a nuclear power plant per year with the same amount of users once we reach that. So that's about 10,000 times more efficient. And today we're solely or completely powered by solar, which is also very different. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into that and explain how that works.
Wonderful, thank you. You said three things. You said first, it's easy to use. You also said it's based on regulatory systems.
Yes.
And you said it's sustainable.
Right.
There's another thing that you've been talking about, and you've said that it's about trust. Can you tell us a little bit more? What does blockchain for nature look like on the ground? When you say trust and sustainability, and also you mentioned it's powered by solar, how does that all come together? How does it look in real?
So blockchain in its nature supports trust in that everything is transparent and it's on a ledger. That's great for finance, obviously, and it's great for having systems that are easy for communities to use that really need it, and making sure that funds actually get to those users. So if we were to invest in supporting an economy in Africa, we could know that the end user, the people that really need the money, are getting it. Or it also allows for then us to put in security measures or for in hacking in cases where people get hacked, like we can have insurance and all of those types of things that are very important. After losing on the blockchain, it can be devastating to not have those types of systems in place.
Thank you. Many blockchains, or especially blockchains for nature, when we talk about, they start off strong, then eventually as they grow, they face tension between rapid growth, ownership, and justice. What are the principles from your work and from your experience that are essential to scale without losing all the bits that you mentioned, without losing the transparency, the trust, the justice that comes along?
Yeah, so essential for scale is regulation, having a regulatory framework to work within. That's absolutely essential. Sustainability is another thing. We obviously don't want to be destroying our environment to use a technology for transferring funds around the world. That doesn't make sense. And then usability. How usable is it? Can somebody access it from their phone? Can they transfer funds quickly? So those are the main things that affect scalability.
Thank you. How does this interplay also when we talk about the more social side, when we talk about the people's perspective? How can we bring in communities, different stakeholders, from youth to indigenous communities to women? How do we make this, one, understandable, accessible, but two, how do we make them part of the process and not just as byproducts that happen to be consuming it?
I love this question. So Peace Through Trade is a proof of work blockchain, which means it's truly decentralized. And what that means is that every owner of the token is an owner of the chain. The chain is run by a constitution. So the creators and the owners have the same rights as the users or the coin holders, number one. Number two, mining. With traditional systems such as Bitcoin, as we all know, I love that example, you have to invest in a very expensive ASIC server rig setup to be able to mine and participate in the network. With our system, with a desktop computer right now, you can press a button and you're mining and earning. And you are a node in our network. So that empowers communities and empowers people all around the world to participate in our economy.
Wonderful. Well, how do we, I think like picking on from what you said, right? This is an era of transition. We're seeing this slowly build in front of our eyes. What does this look like for you? What would this sustainable transition look like when it comes to finance and financial models in that case? And also, how do we change the interdependence from the current financial model, slowly moving into the new market?
Well, I have my own opinions about that. I actually think that over time, Web 2, the current systems is going to be absorbed by Web 3. The user is not going to really know the difference. We talk about Web 3 and how it's decentralized and all the amazing perks, but we're the creators and these are the things that matter to us and we're sharing them, but the end user just wants something that works. They don't really care if they're talking on the phone with T-Mobile or Verizon. It's as long as they can make the phone call and they can use the system and it works. Now, ideally, that system protects the user, supports the user, and is something that contributes to their communities and society, and it's not parasitical, and that is really our goal with Peace Through Trade, is something that's really giving back to the community, allows full adoption and full participation by everybody, by all walks of life. Anybody with a cell phone can participate, and yeah, those are the most important things for us. And then obviously the sustainability component and really creating something that's not going to destroy the planet that we live on so that we can transact, essentially.
Can you tell us a little bit more on the sustainability aspect? How does this work in real time, and how does it remain at the center of all of the work that you're doing?
How does the sustainability component work in our we're solar based, so that's a big part of it. And then, allowing users to mine from just a regular computer, and it's, the basic points of that is that it's just being powered by their computer at home and just allowing for that. One other component that I didn't mention is that it's also extremely economical. So that also allows a lot of people to participate, and it doesn't cost a lot of money to power this mining rig or to transact on the system. It's very, very, very inexpensive. It's 0.001 of a PTT coin for a transaction to be completed. So it's very economical. Anybody can participate.
Thank you. Okay, finally, to close us off, if you could rewrite one global rule to accelerate blockchain-enabled restoration, what would it be?
So that's a very big question, and it really depends. There's so many factors that would determine the answer, and it really depends who you're asking. So, depending on the country and the government and who's answering the question. For me, I would want to create some sort of KYC, MAL, I want to say system that the whole world could come on board with, and that would really then obviously support our system to be able to be fully compliant and really support users with insurance and security, because that's my number one need. But if you talk to my CTO, it's going to be a sandbox where developers can go and play with innovation and work within the legal framework. And if you talk to my husband, it's going to be transparent transactions. So all of those things are all equally important to complete the ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kailea, for everything you do, but also for being such a powerful force, such a powerful voice, and an advocate, not just for sustainable finance, but for nature, for people, and for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we are going to continue with our programming for this morning. Hita will continue to be our moderator. And now we invite into the stage Javier Manzanares Allen, CEO and founder of Allen Manza Incorporated, and Erai Beckman, founding partner of Peace to Trade. You might join us on stage now.
All right. I get the double pleasure this time. First with Kaile and then with Rai. Well, I think we'll continue on that. But before we move into the context again, Javier and Rai, if you could both to the audience, introduce yourself a little bit. You've both had extremely long, wonderful backgrounds. So tell us in a minute a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'll go first. Well, thank you very much for helping to moderate. Thank you to Juan Carlos Monterrey Gomez, Matthew, and the great people that have been here presenting. It really is quite remarkable what Jaime and AECOM and One Amazon just presented. It's incredible what's happening, the innovation in this room. It really is remarkable. My wife and I, we run a private family office focused on sustainable development based in Singapore. We're here for Peace Through Trade because it's a project we've been investing in for almost 4.5, 5 years, as my wife mentioned. We're based in universities. We focused on compliance, legal regulation, which we knew would be coming. So that's a solid foundation to build on, and sustainability. So we're really grateful. We were honored at the United Nations, as was mentioned, and we won in the private sector for as a leader for AI, blockchain, and sustainability, which is pretty cool. And we're happy to be here and talk about how it will help, God willing, projects like One Amazon, a platform like Peace Through Trade can help globally now fund a trusted, way in which sustainability can really thrive. That's the goal, the data, the finance, and the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Rai. Javier.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Hita. A pleasure to be here. And also my gratitude and thanks to Juan Carlos, Mi Ambiente, the organizers, Matt in particular. So a little bit about my background. I come from finance, if I may say, starting from private sector with Grupo Banco Santander, then moving a bit also into the private sector with Fierro Group, different banks, different countries. And then from that, I thought it was a good idea to switch to development banking. So I worked for the Development Bank of Central America. It's called CABE. After that, United Nations with UNOPS and Mercosur area, and then switched to the Green Climate Fund. So stayed pretty much in finance, but the GCF out of Korea for 8 years. Then more recently, about 4 years ago, I founded my own company, Allen Mansa, and I participate now in a number of boards. I'm also senior advisor to the World Bank in climate finance and carbon markets. Very happy to be here, and hopefully our conversation, when we spoke this earlier on this morning with Ire and Hita, we really hope our conversation is useful to you. And for that, we'll try to move into the financial mechanisms for project development and different options, vehicles, instruments in climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so to get us into the conversation, starting with Javier, as you mentioned, you come from finance. You've experienced it from various angles. We talk a lot about finance and climate, or finance and nature going hand in hand. There is not going to be any climate action without financial support. But what does this really mean in the sense, from the experience that you have, what kind of projects do you believe are bankable projects, and how does that really function in the real world?
Well, bankable projects. So let's talk about from the perspective of the finance industry. And for that, if I may encourage you to check into a new publication by Sureco and Partners, funded by Euroclima, and that is on mapping out the actors and financial mechanisms that we can see in climate finance, that's been recently published. But if I go into the bankable projects, and for many of you, well, obviously the initial stage is about the same everywhere. So you have to put your money, your efforts and resources into the conceptual part of your project, right? So for that, once that you have put all of your efforts into that, before presenting a project into a bank, so there are sources of technical assistance out there.
and not everyone is knowledgeable about that. So institutions like the GCF, like the JEF, the CIF, Adaptation Fund, so on and so forth, I mean, they truly exist. If you have not given it a try, that's a viable source of technical assistance for the pre-feasibility and feasibility stage. I'm saying that because without a solid feasibility study, banks truly will not look into the projects. I think most of us are aware of that. And then there is another element that perhaps we'll have a chance to discuss today, and that's for developing countries and projects to become bankable. It's not enough with project finance, unfortunately. So if we prove that we have obtained results, I'll make our life much easier. I think it makes sense, right? And that's what we call performance or results-based financing. That's where carbon markets fall in, right? Within that category. So we prove we have obtained a reduction, or we have avoided the emission of carbon gases or equivalents. Then we convert those into a credit. We obtain financing based on results that have been verified. That's, in my opinion, why carbon markets, biocredits, water credits, all of them three instruments within result-based financing, they present an opportunity that will and should support the financing of projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think on the note that Javier currently ended with, he talked about credits. But the other side of it now, as we're seeing, is blockchain and is the entire technology that's coming up and evolving. What does blockchain bring to the table? And how do we use this to accelerate and also bring more implementation to the forefront?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I know it's kind of a new technology. So who of you here in the audience remembers during the mid-90s when the internet was coming up? Can you put your hand up? Yeah. Now, keep your hand in the air if at that time you understood exactly how it was going to apply to your life, your career, your business, and your endeavors. Everyone's put their hand down. So at the time, I was 14 years old. I was in my family's offices, and we had no idea exactly how it would impact the world. My father, who was a more traditional economist, thought that Amazon was overly hyperinflated and this wasn't going to work. But the markets were exploding at that time because we were finally getting public listings, which is why it's incredible to go the legal, regulated, compliant route. So even if you don't understand right now how blockchain will impact your work and what you're doing, I hope to help in the participation of this panel to basically lay the next groundwork for you. So I know blockchain can be overwhelming in that it's a new technology, but just think of it as like the internet. It affected all aspects of our lives. Now, blockchain is the next natural evolution for all of our technology. The data, like Jaime here was describing from one Amazon, it's going to go on the blockchain. Why? Because now once data, we have to make sure obviously it's verified data, but once it goes on the blockchain, it's now permanent. So the whole world can trust it now. The whole world knows that no one group can ever edit that data once it's on the blockchain, which is really incredible if you think about it as our conscious evolution as a species. We have never before had a place where data or money can go and no one individual can change it according to their self-interests. Does that make sense? Is this making sense? Now imagine the future. Now that means what my wife was describing, that Peace Through Trade is we care about the planet, so we care about sustainability. So we realize that blockchain is absolutely the future. It's going to impact every single aspect of our lives. There is no layer one that truly addresses both legal compliance, which is invaluable and needed to scale, as well as sustainability. Definitely not at scale. With Peace Through Trade, as we build more applications on it in the future, it will become more energy efficient. So that's really cool. So now we have something that, like your iPhone, that's what a layer one is. You know how that you use multiple applications on your iPhone, right? You use your email, you use your WhatsApp. Well, that's what you can build on a layer one. So in the future, a one Amazon actually could be built on peace through trade, projects like that. Now, how it will impact finance, this is where it gets really exciting. So, and I used this example last time at Nature Summit. So no matter what your project is that you're doing right now, if you're getting data, you're putting funds to work, and you're raising funds, well, think about it like this. If you're not already taking effort to take your data and your ability to receive funds and distribute funds on blockchain, you must. Because now imagine this scenario. Think about what you do and think about you've not pursued a blockchain. We can't fund you through blockchain, so we can't ensure the funds have been received. Your data of your good work, your really good work that's really helping, right, is not on the blockchain, and therefore we can't verify it. We can't absolutely trust it. But now imagine there's a competitive group that is doing what I just described. Imagine their funds are received on blockchain so we can all see it. We don't have to trust anyone. We can see where they're distributed. We don't have to trust anyone. And their data also is going on blockchain. Well, which group, the group that has nothing on blockchain, nothing that can be verified, you have to absolutely trust them, or the group that has quite a bit on blockchain and you don't have to trust them because you can absolutely see it? Which group would you fund? Which group would you work with? Right? So that's the power of blockchain. Now, what's really incredible too, in closing, because this is already a lot of information, is now imagine the global financial technology for how we send money back and forth with each other. Right now, we've reached the limit of what the global SWIFT technology system can provide us as a species. How do you wire money right now to support your youth projects in India? How do you do that right now? Can it be done easily? Maybe, but do you have the same level of confidence as if you're an American sending it within America? The truth is, no, you don't. Would you have confidence in sending significant amounts of money into random nations in Africa you've never done business with? No, you don't. Whereas with blockchain, it's instant, it's fast, it's safe, it's secure. As my wife mentioned with Peace Through Trade, we did the compliance work so that it's 100% unlimitedly insured. Well, just imagine the potential that that opens up for the world of global finance. Now, a group from anywhere in the world can trust that they could fund your project anywhere in the world. So I hope that helps just kind of open up the mind, for people of how blockchain will apply to the world, but also, help impact sustainability.
Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, because I think it truly can become very complex and overwhelming. But what I can tell you is that blockchain keeps on growing and growing and growing, even if we don't participate in here. I mean, to the point where I happen to be a president of the board of one of those carbon standards. It's called biocarbon. And the registry global carbon trace is based entirely on blockchain. So it keeps on growing. And if I may encourage you to start digging into it, we will all be using blockchain within the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think picking up from there and also leading on, Javier, based on your background, you've worked right from the private sector to multilateral to public, across the spectrum, so to say. How can we build collaboration models that can mobilize capital, one, at speed, and two, at scale, but while maintaining the transparency, accountability, and the impact that we need?
Yeah, well, again, I don't want to go too much into the complexity of blockchain, but you have spoken earlier on about the decentralized organization. So in the near future, please think about decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. Will play an important role. It will take quite some time, but it will play an important role. That's like on the futuristic technology or structures. On the current one, we have not used entirely PPPs to the level where we should. And public-private partnerships, if you approach country by country with the right regulation, it should be a very reasonable, collaborative effort from private sector and public sector to come together. That along with the usual platforms out there that support collaboration among different parties. And I think that's mostly what the way I would address collaboration and scale. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, when we talk about collaboration, you mentioned a lot about, and Kylie did as well, about trust, about the openness, the transparency of the entire process. How does this link with when we're talking about newer projects, which might not be, I mean, when Javier, when you started, you mentioned a few things that make projects bankable. And I asked this question from the point of view of someone who's worked massively with young people and also leads a very youth-led organization. How do we, projects that do not have that so-called bankability metrics, because we've not had the kind of finance to show that this has worked. Is there a way that we can work around, understand the work that you're doing, understand the systems, and find ways to actually build that bridge and collaboration, so with the people on the ground and the systems that you're building?
Yeah, there is. And it's one thing to be able to explain something technologically in a way that only the speaker understands. It's another thing to try and simplify these principles well enough to keep you guys engaged and awake, because we've already been listening for a few hours. So the ultimate answer to that is no one has everything figured out. I've been meeting some great people like Javier and some wonderful people, even just since last night's reception and today. And I had an incredible conversation with Juan Carlos Monterrey Gomez about the standardization of a process. So even carbon credits, right? Where I was speaking with a business partner of ours in Singapore, and he was saying it's nowhere near reached the volume and engagement that it could. And that's because there are various levels of standardization. So and I'm not saying that this is the ultimate answer, but this is the way I would approach it as an entrepreneur for the youth. The term you've heard about blockchain, but you might not completely understand it, is consensus. What does that mean? It just means that we've all agreed. Okay. So with any new project, what I would encourage the youth to do is to map out the results data that they're working towards achieving. They can share that with the world publicly, and if people agree, they can help fund and support their efforts. And then as they go along, they can show the funds. The cool thing about the blockchain is now you could, from Canada, Panama, Pakistan, fund a project in India now of youth instantly. They can show transparently they've received the funds and where they're going. So just that gap, here's where funds have gone, is still our biggest issue with the United Nations, with government global funding right now. That it's 2025, and we have USAID ran into a lot of problems in that they sent out billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, and we know the funds got there, but after that, we don't absolutely know, were they interrupted by corruption or misuse or what, so that we're still there as a society. Juan Carlos talks about the fact that he wants to accelerate, and Jaime mentioned that we don't have a lack of resources. So then you can think about how blockchain, you put that in the middle now with the technology. Well, now we can have these things called smart contracts where it just fires automatically, the funds are received, they're released, and the data is submitted. Now, the cool thing about the blockchain is once a group submits that data, the whole world can look at it now and say, we agree with that, we don't agree with that. So if I'm just to kind of evolve it, is just to help, and this is sort of like a theoretical philosophical discussion at this point as to how it will impact our conscious evolution as a species. It creates accountability, and it creates trust to the point where it's permanent trust. So how will that help us? I think it forces our collective evolution when no one can any longer lie to us of where the funds are going or the data, if I'm explaining that well enough. It's kind of a hard conversation, but if I were youth, I would represent data. And then the cool thing is now we can help fund and support each other now with the evolution to SWIFT with this blockchain finance as well.
Me? I please compliment. Yeah. Definitely standardization, Iri, completely agree with you. We need to get to that transparency and scale. I think there's one additional element at least. When we talk about carbon markets, the numbers are humble, on or about perhaps $2 billion. When we talk about mandatory compliance market, at volume, yes, the European ETS by itself, it is over 800 billion. So think about this. Without some level of supervision, Juan Carlos is here with us now. Without the level of supervision from authorities, the voluntary carbon markets will not explode. What's the perfect balance in that level of supervision? That's for politicians, that's for governments to establish. But the voluntary carbon markets is missing supervision. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, at some point, Juan Carlos Monterrey Gomez should explain and share what the government of Panama is doing, even as it relates to the carbon markets, because it's remarkable, it's very progressive, And it absolutely represents a result of a standard that, in my opinion, very early on, I'm still learning, but we could absolutely represent that to future markets. So definitely a good thing to learn about how you're taking your data. Would you trust your data, right? Is your data bankable? And then you ultimately just have to represent it well enough until you're getting that result of the funding to then go ahead and pursue your project. We're suggesting you learn more about blockchain, decentralized finance for your data. Also, as it is the future, it is coming, and it's absolutely going to happen.
Thank you. Final question to close this off. For you, Javier. When we talk about the next generation of financial systems, what is the guiding principle or the sort of, what should we keep in mind when we develop and work towards this next generation of financial systems?
A collaborative system, transparency, and definitely we need to invite participants in becoming part of the decision. So that we've mentioned earlier on about the DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. It doesn't matter how you want to call it, but without real participation from citizens and the number of important decisions that governments, politicians make, without that level of transparency and collaborative participation, I don't think this is going to truly make a difference. Thank you.
I agree. And just to add to it in closing, it's equitable access. What does that mean? How do we get the funds distributed throughout the world? And I know we're on time here, so just look into it. In Africa, when they first launched the first blockchain payment initiatives, the adoption was incredibly fast. It exceeded everyone's expectations because even in the most remote villages, they had smartphones. And even without internet, they were using blockchain adoption. So I just would only add to the final part of this conversation, it's a little philosophical, is that your sovereign freedom is something that you're about to be able to experience more so than at any other time in human history. And that's what will allow the scalability. It's the trust. And that's something that a proof of work blockchain like Peace Through Trade, I'm sure we're not the first, we're not going to be the last, will empower you to have. And the youth get this. The millennials, all the Gen Zs and Gen Xs, Gen Ys, and developing nations, they get this faster. And it's going to be able to, it's so cool because it's going to be able to provide them with greater stability, greater trust, greater insurance than they've ever had before. And that future means we could not just to access the mandatory carbon markets, we could actually grow and take better care of the planet faster as a result of these financial and data rails than ever before. And I think we can actually meet the mandates and the goals that we're working towards as a result of blockchain.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both Eray and Javier.
Thank you, Hita, Javier, and Arai. I think it's fitting to build upon this conversation with a deeper dive on innovations in carbon markets. And with that, I'd love to have our distinguished moderator join us. Eileen Flash is the Vice President of AECOM and the Country Director of PANAMA. She'll be curating a conversation with Francisco Benedito, CEO of Climate Trade and an OG in the space who's been around here for a decade and a half plus, as well as Jason Gray, Project Director of GCF, the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force. Please join me in welcoming Jason, Francisco, and Eileen.
Thank you, everyone. We'll continue with innovation in carbon markets. Before we start, why don't you just give a brief summary of who you are and why you're here?
Thank you so much for having me here. Great place and great audience.
So I've been working I've been in banking sector since more than 2 decades, and then I left in 2017 to create the first organization of carbon with Climate Coin in 2017. Then we moved to create Climate Trade, which was the first marketplace for carbon credit using blockchain technology worldwide. We were called the Amazon for Climate. And we're still there, no? So running the company, we are present in 4 countries, growing 100% year over year in terms of volume and visits to the platform, more than 10,000 users. And yeah, trying to grow that 2 billion market into a more billion market for carbon credits.
Hi, thanks for having me here as well. I'm Jason Gray. I have a little bit different background in terms of public sector engagement. I'm a climate lawyer by training. I worked for the government of California for a very long time, focusing on the legal aspect and then overseeing the full implementation of a compliance market, so about a $73 billion market, focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the entire economy of California, including around nature-based solutions within the program. I represented the government of California working with other governments, including with PANAMA, and supporting states and provinces, not just national governments, through a group called the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force, which was created by California, then Governor Schwarzenegger. And a few years ago, I moved from government to help oversee the project of supporting these governors based out of the University of California, Los Angeles. So thanks.
Thank you both. Thank you for being here and give us your inputs on innovation in carbon markets. So digital tools such as blockchain promise transparency and automated traceability, right? So for Francisco, in practice, which technologies are proving most effective in reducing risk and strengthening trust in carbon markets today?
Well, blockchain is key, no? I mean, we started with blockchain because avoids double counting, and it's something that we incorporated back in 2017. And it was that moment when the UN awarded us for that innovation space. So from that moment on, we moved on in a new age because we had already blockchain and then started to come up registries and other type of marketplaces using blockchain technology. That was the key. Afterwards, we started working on digital MRBs. How do we bring data and reduce costs in terms of the bringing carbon credits live, right? I mean, at the end, digital MRBs are key if you have reliable data to avoid cost and make the carbon markets more efficient, right? And for me, there is a third key, which was mentioned in the last panel, which is not that much technology, but it's more like evolution of the markets, right? We have been pushing to get the markets more efficient and more, let's say, not regulated, but more respected and reputed, right? So one of the important parts is like the ICBCM. For me, ICBCM is a before and after, right? We were top 100 people in the world in carbon markets. It was McKinsey, Bank of England, and some other partners. We were 100 people which we would define the CCPs, the carbon core principles. So today when you get carbon credits, you have CORSIA credits, you have different standard credits, but at the end you have credits that are labeled and checked by the CCP. That's key. I mean, we need some sort, and then we can put in technology, digitize it, it will be faster, easier, and cheaper.
Yeah, I've heard it takes years to
it's about money. It's about money and putting the right people together. It's always the same thing. I mean, they don't. There is a lot of money for certain things, and there's not that much money for certain other things.
But for example, emerging markets still struggle to participate, right? So, what innovations can the finance of carbon credits can do to make them more accessible for these emerging markets?
Sorry to drive the conversation. So, Article 6, Paris Agreement, ITMOs, ITMOs are key in all the carbon markets evolution, right? Governments are the ones that are going to be able to sell and buy carbon credits depending on their necessities. And that's going to be digitized. The problem that governments have, like many other groups, is they don't have money sometimes, and they need facilities from a bank, IDB, multilaterals to fund the projects that say if that project can generate carbon credits and generates impact or not. And that's key. And again, that's capital again. We need money. So we need to dedicate money to the governments, have that facility easy, not a process of bureaucracy of taking 2 years to generate the carbon credits. Because if not, it's a $2 billion market
Yeah, we'll see if it goes to 1.5 trillion market. In the middle, there are companies like mine that 3 of them, they went bankrupt. And they were great projects, but they just didn't have traction because there was no volume in the market. And then you need to do other things to complement until the market is there, right?
I agree. But Jason, to your point, jurisdictional approaches are gaining global attention. So what governance innovations are enabling forest-rich regions to align with International Article 6 and attract this high-quality finance?
Thanks. I'll give a little perspective on that first question too. I'll do my best to answer both. I think the platform, the technological tool that helps implement a market is different from the underlying standards for actually showing action, right? So if you go to blockchain, if you go to a different type of registry system, I think those are important evolutions as we go forward. But really what we're looking for is what type of action and creating the trust around that type of action. Around jurisdictional approaches, it's looking to see what role does government have in that. So when you're talking about Article 6, kind of the emerging Article 6 markets, talking about voluntary markets in a $2 billion framework right now, I think it's also looking at what are governments looking to do to create additional trust. So if a government like Panama is looking for their carbon decree around jurisdictional approaches for forestry protection, for instance, it's looking at are investors comfortable with the underlying accounting standard for showing action, and then looking at certainty for investment because of signals that the government, in this instance, may be sending. And I think the jurisdictional approach that the members of the organization I work with, which is 45 states and provinces from 11 countries, including Mato Grosso, which we heard about earlier from Brazil, it's really looking at what is the willingness and political political willingness of that jurisdiction to show seriousness in that type of market. And I think we're seeing a little bit of fragmentation in terms of domestic markets setting up at the subnational and jurisdiction and national scale. And from my perspective, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think you're looking to say, in that jurisdiction, are you sending a signal that investors can rely on the government designing an approach which will guarantee results? And the jurisdictional approach is really looking at, like what Juan Carlos mentioned earlier, combining all the 3 different conventions, combining a whole government approach to design that market. You're not just looking at your environment minister, you're bringing in your finance, you're bringing your planning to look at your forest assets, I guess, for lack of a better term, and designing a jurisdictional policy to say we're creating enabling conditions to attract investment because the government is standing behind this. And that may attract voluntary investors and may attract folks that are looking at a future compliance market. But that jurisdictional approach from the perspective of a government person is really key because it's showing that willingness and that stability.
And legitimacy, right? So in that perspective, equitable benefit sharing is essential, right, for legitimacy. So what models ensure carbon revenues reach indigenous people, and what gaps are still there to be addressed?
It's a fundamental question. Again, the role of government here and what we try to help support our members is increasing their collaboration and true partnership with communities and indigenous leaders. So not just beneficiaries, but looking at how do you design your public policy together. And I'll give one example from the GCF Task Force Network. The state of Acre in Brazil, a long-standing leader in developing public policies around climate protection, around water and other things, just finished a benefit sharing agreement in consultation with indigenous communities, Ribeirinhos, other communities in Acre. 72% of any revenues coming in from the sale of jurisdictional REDD+ credits, biodiversity credits, whatever the type of financing may be, will go to those communities because those communities designed that program. So one of the things that I think is key is helping support these governments as they're looking to the consultation process, learning from each other, and then designing it together.
Okay, so participation is key. You want to add something, Francisco, to that?
No, for me, the most important is what you were mentioning about jurisdiction. I think that one of the possible growths of also voluntary markets are like combination with jurisdictional markets, right? Like Europe is already coming up with a new regulation that,
Correct.
well, it came up with a new regulation that is not in place yet, but it's already December last year. In 2027, they will start buying voluntary carbon markets, voluntary carbon credits from removals will be valid for the EU ETS in Europe. which is immediate liquidity. That's great for the markets. So hopefully that grows in every market, like California, of course, is an example throughout the world, right? It's saved companies from like Tesla, for example, like so it's great.
So I have a final question for each of you as a closing remark. So, in innovation, if innovation is to strengthen carbon markets in service of climate and communities, what guiding principles should lead the next decade? So what would say innovation is leading this, let's say this changing the market. So what a principle should lead next decade?
I think integrity is key, and I think we've heard a lot about that today in terms of integrity of the underlying accounting standard you're looking at. But I also think innovation is going to be looking beyond integrity to looking at what's actually feasible and scalable now. So not getting hung up in the integrity question to the extent that you don't invest. And I think that innovation of looking at how do you help support those programs, voluntary programs or compliance or future compliance programs to go together and investing now, that's the innovation I think the world needs to see right now is just we need investment.
Well, everything is about technology, right? So right now in these days. No? So for me, it's proof of impact. So I remember when I was thinking on create proof of impact.
Great.
So I was thinking on creating one layer one long time ago, and I was thinking, okay, that's not going to be a proof of work. That's going to be a proof of impact. How can I prove that the project that I'm paying, like carbon market project, carbon credits project, has really a positive impact, right? And that thing is key. But I say technology because we can reinforce that with the technology applied to that. Right? So I think it's going to be the drivers, or should be the drivers.
I like it. So integrity and proof of impact. That's amazing. Thank you both for participating.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Eileen, Francisco, and Jason, for that great panel on carbon markets. Now we invite into the stage Sandra Vasquez, Executive Director of Pro Equasuero, and Corey Albers, CEO of Source to Source, for a fireside conversation on nature-based solutions for water treatment. So Corey, Sandra, coming to the stage.
I think they're putting the video first. Do you want to present it, the video?
Maybe I'll just make a statement first.
Okay.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Corey Albers, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much to Juan Carlos and to the minister. Sorry that he couldn't be here with us today, but I'm honored to be here, and thank you very much, Sandra, for hosting me. We've seen some carbon market stuff. We've seen some finance things, and even some with the One Amazon ways of preserving. And what I'm hoping to show here is some real active opportunities that we can bring to the table to show how projects can directly be implemented in Panama. So there's a short video here, and do you have a preamble that you're going to read, or? Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Imagine a Panama where every drop of water tells a new story, a story of renewal, resilience, and communities strengthened by nature. Source 2, Source helps make that future possible with practical, affordable, nature-based systems that clean water, restore ecosystems, and create spaces people are proud to use. It begins with the Nautilus Pond, where trash, sediment, and plastics are captured as water settles, flowing into a calm storage pond, a pond that becomes a source of community value. Plants and fish can be sustainably harvested, while families reconnect with land and water. Pathways guide visitors to shaded overlooks and interpretive signs, showing how this living system protects their health and their future. From the storage pond, water enters a protected network of treatment spaces, horizontal wetlands, vertical biofilters, and diverse ecological zones that purify water with biofilms, plant roots, sand, and sunlight. No chemicals, no complex machinery, just nature working the way it has for millions of years. These systems balance themselves and resist failure without chemicals or other human intervention. Mosquitoes, algae, and other nuisances are naturally controlled by intense competition for space and resources. Clean water returns to the storage pond through dense vegetation, renewed again and again in a continuous natural cycle. Everywhere possibilities open up: boating, swimming, fishing, ecotourism, education, and cultural events. These are high-performance water treatment plants, hiding in plain sight, but they are also parks, habitats, and beloved community spaces that continuously clean water. Landscapes can be shaped to reflect Panama's stories and symbols, strengthening the connection between people. Nature-based systems deliver what communities need: much lower life cycle costs, high resilience to neglect or component failure, low energy demand, and no chemicals. Simple operation with minimal training, proven removal of pollutants, including microplastics and pharmaceuticals. Yes, they need more land. Land becomes a valuable, beautiful asset for the community. Nature-based systems advance all 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, supporting environmental health, social well-being, and long-term economic strength. This is the future of water in Panama, a future where engineering works with nature, where communities thrive, and where Panama leads in sustainable innovation. Source 2. Source is ready to help bring this vision to life.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here with you, Corey, this morning and have this fireside chat. Just to introduce you a bit, I'm going to read a little bit about your bio. So Corey Albers is an innovator in regenerative water treatment solutions. He has led natural filtration and constructed wetland projects across Latin America and North America, integrating science, engineering, and community participation. His work focuses on bringing clean water access to vulnerable communities through nature-based systems. He currently leads Source to Source, a company scaling sustainable and accessible water treatment technologies. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
So to start, Corey, water treatment is becoming a central piece of climate resilience. We know that. But why are nature-based solutions gaining so much momentum right now? And what does it mean to view them, not just as environmental tools, but as real solutions for health, local economies, and communities?
Yes. Well, in terms of human sewage in the world, over 80% of human sewage that's generated in the world is untreated and is discharged directly into either rivers or the ocean. And that's just the human sewage. That has almost none of the agri-industry effluents that are created are treated. What that means, and when we say treated, it's sort of the conventional global north kind of wastewater treatment systems. Now, the opportunity arises because since so little has been is actually treated, it means that it's not accessible. The current technologies that are considered wastewater treatment are just inaccessible to most of the world. So nature-based systems take about 20% of the cost for life cycle cost is only 20% or so, or even less compared to a conventional system. So there is an opportunity when it's inaccessible and too expensive for conventional treatment. And they produce so many other benefits, like the list of green things there, additional benefits for communities. There is momentum, but it's still a long way from being enough momentum to make a huge difference in the world.
Okay. So source to source blends nature with practical innovation. What technologies are you using to improve the efficiency of natural treatment systems? How do these improvements reduce costs and make operations easier for end users?
So in terms of innovation, one of the ways that we have brought kind of an innovative thinking is, and was that about, this is about technology? What technology?
Yes.
Innovative technologies. Well, we actually take the opposite approach from what many of the engineering firms do today, which is pursuit of efficiency through technology. Whereas our approach is actually to integrate the nature-based systems. We have 15 to 20 million years of evolutionary biology behind us, which is our superpower. We don't need to add a lot of other technologies. In fact, it's making whatever technologies and materials we're using accessible to the people that are going to be implementing them and caring for them. So we restrict the palette of technologies and materials. We only use natural materials, soils, sands, gravel, naturally available or locally available, and the native plant communities. That's all we use. In terms of equipment, it's pumps, maybe some simple screens, and very simple water level measurement technology, extremely simple. And that means that people don't have to have a high level of training in order to be part of that solution. And if they don't have to have a high level of training, they can be sourced from the community themselves. In fact, that's where we see most of the people coming from. So our innovative approach is actually to go in the other direction from the way most engineering minds think of innovation, is pursuing more clever solutions, where for us it's going back to basics. And that's where our success has come from.
Okay. So we know for a fact that nature-based solutions work, but they're still seen as very small projects. From source to sources experience, what is needed to scale them? How do we help municipalities, companies, communities see that these solutions as long-term investments and not pilot plots, not experiments?
Yeah, so they're seen as small projects often because they are almost never allowed to be big. There is no trouble scaling a nature-based solution. We do it at large enough scales right now so that if we just replicate the cells that we have, we can scale it up to support hundreds of thousands of people and massive production of water. And just to, not to put too fine a point on it, the largest scale nature-based systems are like the Amazon, right? Like there's no trouble scaling. This is millions of years worth of evolutionary biology that has gone into demonstrating scale is possible. The real problem, in my view, is that all of the ancillary benefits that come with these nature-based systems are not assigned monetary value. And therefore, in principle, a landowner is going to acquire more value by selling to a developer who's going to put a building on that compared to a nature-based system. Now, we've been fortunate enough to have clients that have had enough vision to see that the additional benefits that come from nature-based systems have been valuable enough to them that they've decided to go forward with that, and therefore we built our success on top of those. But that's a small subset of potential clients. So I hope by working with people in this room, in this type of mindset, with the financing models and things like that we've heard about, that there will be opportunity for these type of things to come forward and be real with new funding models. So it's a long road, but it's worth doing.
Perfect. Corey, I have one last question. The solutions, the nature-based solutions, they mimic natural processes, right? Wetlands that filter, plants that absorb nutrients, microorganisms that clean water. Which of these approaches are delivering the strongest results on the ground? In what context do they perform best? Rural communities, hotels, agro-industries, or coastal watersheds?
So all of the processes that you described, we don't separate them out and say, optimize one or the other. They're all necessary in order for a balanced and sustainable nature-based system to work. Again, it's all based on evolutionary biology that's tens of millions of years in the making. Which locations, whether it's hotels, agri-industry, communities, all these are different scales and things like that. Again, it's not an issue of scaling. Scaling is not a problem with these things. In fact, the bigger you get, there's exponentially greater benefits as you go up in scale. But the real context that we need is to make sure that the place that nature-based systems can do their real work is when they're dealing with pollutants of the nature of like an organic type of a contaminant, meaning, human sewage is mostly organic contamination. Agribusiness is mostly organic contamination. Even, hydrocarbon contamination is nothing more than an organic molecule. So all of those things can be handled very well. But when you get into other industrial locations like pulp mills or tanneries and things like that with very toxic chemicals, we can't treat that with nature-based systems because that is toxic to the very biology that's trying to treat the water. Mm-hmm. So any one of those different contexts will work, mm-hmm. but we have to make sure that it's focused on the organic type contaminants to clean those. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Corey. The truth is, we know for a fact that MBS is the way to go. There are a lot of grants out there, we that come always from the nonprofit, and we're always looking for grants. There's a lot of grants right now in the philanthropic side to look for nature-based solutions in communities and apply them in communities. I don't know if you would like to add anything else?
Really, Panama is an enormous opportunity down here because you have such a range of climates. In Panama City here, you have lots of rain comparatively, but in Azuero, not nearly as much. And you have contaminated streams. All of those things are incredibly well suited to nature-based solutions. And I really hope that we can collectively find ways of having projects in Panama because this would be an ideal place to do it. So thank you all, and again, thanks to Juan Carlos for hosting me here and inviting me, and all the organizers, Matt, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Sandra. And now the moment we've all been waiting for, the final person preventing us from getting lunch. Nick Davis is the founder and CEO of Grid Market, which is a AI-based national energy grid transition platform that he's been building, and over the last decade plus, Nick has built public-private partnerships with several governments around the world, from the Kingdom of Tonga and the independent state of Samoa to the Republic of Palau, to Vanuatu, to St. Martin, and several others. But that's not why he's here today. Nick, as a true entrepreneur, has launched his newest venture, SMR Defense. And what Nick is going to highlight today is exactly how he is using technology and innovation as a force to defend nature. Nick, take it away, buddy.
This is going to be a much more interesting presentation. But unfortunately, my dog is missing its heart. It's stuck in Panamanian customs. Move a battery through customs, you have to ship it with letterhead. It's a very official process. Do I have my slides available? I need to show something, otherwise it's just me yapping about this dead dog. I'll wait a second. Yes. I'll give him a minute. I'll at least have him sit comfortably while we're pulling this up. To kind of give the spiel as we go, as these things are being pulled up, and just, are they? If not, I guess I'm ripping. Okay, good. To kind of get into it, so Matt mentioned it briefly, but what I usually talk about and where I typically make my money for dinner is my company Grid Market. And what we've done for years is really focus on on-site renewable energy and microgrid projects for some of the largest energy users in the world. So automotive industrial manufacturers, now hyperscalers, cold storage facilities, critical infrastructure. And what's really, apparent as we look at funding on the critical infrastructure side is that critical infrastructure that we often overlook, of course, is nature. So to give a little bit of a sense of what we're doing here, I've built a fleet robotics company that agnostically sits on top of various hardware providers and coordinates UAVs, so drones, dogs, which are quadrupeds, which work really well on the ground, some wheeled, some with arms that can do maintenance tasks. And the idea here is, in addition to just having these defend data centers, distributed energy sites, small modular reactors, let's defend what's most critical to us and our future as well, which are these natural ecosystems, things that would typically require really like armies of hundreds and hundreds of people in certain territories to defend, to grab data. Let's take advantage of the full breadth of offerings and the fact that these things don't sleep. As long as you have your battery, this thing's very much asleep, which kind of sucks, but what are we going to do? So you guys know more about these statistics on the nature side than me. Trillions of dollars in annual nature lost. There's poaching, there's illegal logging, there's really things that are unaccounted for that, I can't even begin to list. The reality of some of our automated systems now, between what you can interpret with AI online or what you can gather through robotics, it's a missed opportunity. And it's a lot that can be protected, a lot that can be maintained, a lot that can really be defended at scale. So that's the whole point of this. And simply put, we can't hire enough humans to do this work and run some of these patrols. I really founded this to deal with a lot of the esoteric maintenance issues that are out there. So changing filters on linear generators and fuel cells. Things that are kind of mind-numbing tasks at scale when you're supplying a gigawatt scale data center. But these things are naturally, as they patrol, data collectors. They can collect pollen as they move through a forest. They can use computer vision to determine whether there's a threat to an ecosystem. Is there an illegal logger that goes back into a cloud? They can self-charge and self-dock, and they can keep going indefinitely, powered by anything from distributed solar to conventional fuels that run through batteries, or they can do swap outs of these batteries through automated arms. So yeah, what I'm really showing is kind of this future with autonomous nature guardians that can patrol at scale, coordinated fleets that can go to some of the most critical parts of the world, parts that are hard to access. They can do it on wheels. They can do it on four legs. You can even make hardware spiders doing these kinds of patrols if that's a more convenient way to go through an ecosystem, because we're not the best patrollers. We're bipedal. What that means is all of our energy goes to making our brains big and making us smart. It doesn't make us the best movers through an environment. These things move better. Again, I can't prove it to you until we get to a video, but maybe next time. But just talking about my other company, Grid Market, for a second, the reason that we're really primed to do this roll-up is I've got hundreds of captive energy projects, so these are going to be deployed at scale. They're already at some pilot sites to defend my energy projects. So really looking for partnerships to scale this to some of these natural environments and really kind of battle harden these things in these types of areas, because it's one thing to kind of scoot around a solar field or a small modular reactor, something that's paved, some land that's graded. It's a whole other thing to be going through the muck and mud in a swamp or traipsing through the jungle or going on kind of a different kind of agricultural site. And that's what we need to really battle harden and test for, to make sure that the hardware matches the need and the software can adjust and coordinate these fleets to meet that need. So right now I'll tell you what's good and what's bullshit when it comes to kind of the robotic applications you see. Drones are getting fantastic. UAVs that can self-land, self-charge, self-deploy, that you can control remotely, core part of the fleet. That coordinates with these things that are really good. These are quadrupeds. There are different hardware providers that do it. You have to layer your own software on top of it. This guy usually has a maintenance arm in his back so he can go and clean a solar panel. They can detect thermal runaway, so a system that's overheating. They can detect whether someone is OSHA compliant and has a hard hat on for construction and is violating any insurance protocols. And that's the energy site stuff. So these three are cool. What's completely not cool right now are these kind of bipedal humanoids that you can just shove over and they just fall down like a brick. It's a gimmick and people are using it to raise money, or maybe Tesla has it in a fast food chain to see if it'll work. Maybe they'll be okay eventually. Maybe they'll, hang out in an old folks home someday and, do that kind of work. But these three are what's interesting and what's cool. These units that can actually provide benefit in the field. And these are the kinds of things that we're deploying and trying to get to scale with. So just have how these things can be really ported over from the energy infrastructure landscape to natural patrols and environment. So here's an example of what one of these things looks like when it's fully loaded. This is not the patrol version. This is the code up version, the thing that you can kind of beat up. The other ones are basically the size of a Great Dane or a pony. They're huge, they're intimidating, they can cover a lot of distance. Some of them are wheeled. They have a LiDAR mouth that I'll show you in a video that is constantly generating computer vision, taking in the environment, figuring out waypoints and controls. They can go and connect to systems that do, automated vegetation tagging. They can do kind of all kinds of things. There's really no limit. So just to prove that it moves, I've got to figure out how to click this. Ah. Yeah, that's right. I'm always going to be a... Yeah. Is there a way to click one of these images on the slide? Yeah. Just choose one, and you can kind of see how it moves. Maybe this one. Oh, it's a... Oh, really? Well, that sucks. I'll show it to people on my phone if if they want to see it, I'll show it to you on the phone or the computer later. But this is what happens when these things happen last minute. But these things move around. They go up and down stairs. They can go in harsh terrain. That one I really wanted to show people because I was walking it around the streets of New York in Halloween, terrifying children and parents. It was delivering treats to people, so that was kind of fun. This one is just doing dances in my office. So but yeah, happy to show people on the phone or other ways, and So almost done here so everyone can get to lunch, but really the backbone of all of this as it layers over agnostic hardware is a software brain that's constantly updating. You can track state of charge across your fleet. Is your system running out of batteries? It goes and self-charges in a little doghouse, or if it's a drone, in a little beehive. You can assign maintenance tasks remotely. You can also have AI completely automate those maintenance tasks or patrol tasks. So that can easily be ported over to a nature patrol-based system. And that fleet can really be managed and coordinated across a lot of acreage. So when you look at kind of the ground that human patrol can cover and the expense of human patrol, maybe at best you're getting 400 acres out of a very ambitious team of people during a day. These things can do thousands and thousands of acres. They don't tire unless they don't have a heart, which is its battery. So the data collection I already mentioned, it's really limitless, and it's really kind of immediately interpretable now with what's out there. So very exciting, a lot of applications. We're only just scratching the surface. Now, we're of course in Panama, so good to mention the Darien Gap and applications here. There's obviously security and patrol applications. There's also biodiversity tracking, particularly with the migration issues that were happening in the past. These are the kinds of things where we can use robotics to patrol and to coordinate because human power simply cannot patrol all of this. So we have an opportunity to defend the wild here, to really kind of use the technologies of today and frankly the technologies of the future to really capture as much information as we can to optimize preservation, conservation, to take full inventory of everything that's out there, and to have fun making cool things. So that's it for me.
So if anyone wants to call Nick on his bluff, ask to see those videos after. It's all right. All right, folks, with that, we are going to break for lunch. We are excited to host everyone at the restaurant 1739, which is in the lobby of the hotel. They've sectioned off just for us. So please join me in heading off to lunch and continuing to connect and deepen relationships with your fellow delegates. And then we'll return here at 3 o'clock. Thank you all.